Chapter 9. Beach of the Singing Winds. So what did you say to the sailor? Told him he'd missed the boat? Ken whispered, leaning over Min in the iron bed that creaked with every move. Min turned her back on him. I told him that I was married and what's past is past. What else do you expect me to say? She hunched the thin blankets over her head, but Ken was restless. Did he tell you he loved you? Do you still love him? I have to know. What's the point? Min muttered, wanting to blot out his face and his smell and his gloating. Ken yanked back the bed covers. Sick of you turning your back on me. Look at me when I'm talking to you. Min could smell the whiskey on his stale breath. There's nothing left to say, is there? Ken pulled her roughly. Oh, yes, there is. I'm not putting up with this state of affairs any longer. There's more than one way to skin a rabbit. On your back. Open your legs. I'll show you who's head of this household. No more delay tactics. I'm sick of your tricks, he threatened, pushing her hard into the mattress. Shush, Mother will hear. I can't. You know I can't. Shut your bleeding mouth. I don't care if the whole bloody Fetry hears what's happening in this bed. Open your legs, or do I have to prise them open with my fists, you whore? I'm sick of rubbing off on you like some tuppenny tart. You're my wife, for God's sake. How will we ever get a kiddie with this palaver? I don't want a bairn, she whispered, struggling against him in the darkness. Ken slapped her head. I'm sick of what you want and don't want. Shut up, open your legs or I'll ram it up your backside good and proper. He was pinning her down underneath him, shoving his hand on her face, twisting it into the pillow until she could hardly breathe. She bit his fingers and he yelled, You bitch! If it's a fight you want, you've asked for it now. There's more than one hole down there, and you can scream for your mammy all you like. She won't interfere if she knows what's good for her. No, please, whispered Min, limp with exhaustion. I'll try. Be gentle with me, but it hurts so, Ken. This time he held her fast, forcing himself inside, thrusting himself over and over as she struggled against the burning pain and humiliation. Think about Loverboy, if it makes you feel any better. I'm giving you one for him. Ken was panting, excited by his power. No, stop, it really hurts. Min could not move for the agony as he finally broke into her, spilling himself with relief. There, that's all you've wanted all along. A bit of force. That's what you ladies like. We'll have to do that again to teach you a lesson. Min turned her face from him, weeping into the bolster. The pain was like a burning fire. Only over her dead body would she let him do that to her again. Soon he was snoring evenly, and she slipped from the covers to wipe off the blood and the mess. Never in her life had she felt so dirty and used, so shocked by this side of her husband. Her stomach wanted to throw up at the thought of what he had just done to her. For a second she was numbed and unbelieving, but as the shock subsided, a cold fury fired her resolve. For a second, she saw the heavy fire irons by the hearth and wondered if she could smash them over his head. But her surge of rage was tempered with reality. That would be a hanging offence. Ken was not worth dying for. She raked the fire for a glimmer of warmth and searched for a thick plaid shawl, gumboots and an old mackintosh. She must get out of the house, away from the smell of him, and cleanse away the dirt of the night. She had raped her like an animal, and she hated him now. Her tormented spirit needed fresh air and pure water to wash away his soiling. How she wished she had the courage to throw stones at Ewan's window at the manse and call him to her defence. but this was her secret shame and punishment. How can I live after this? What did I do to deserve this? She sobbed. Only thoughts of Ewan kept her sane as she walked through grass in the early light, her nightdress soaked in the dew. I have to see him again. I can't sleep for the want of him, she whispered to herself. Nothing had changed. After that first wondrous sighting of her old love coming off the ferry, her heart could not lie. Alongside Ewan, Ken would never exist. He was a mere shadow of her first love, but she had clutched at his shadow when the real substance had vanished. Then the full sun had returned, and the shadow was all she was left with. I need to clear my head and think again, she said to herself. I can't let Ewan go away again. He's my love and my life. We made a promise. There's no turning back now. Ken has no hold on me. Not after this, she was thinking. There was only one place to go for peace and cleansing if she was ever to love again. She strode across the coastal path in the moonlight with her head into the wind, the early morning scents like an infusion of herbs. She crept past the silent thatched cottages and crofts, waking sleeping dogs, past the boats moored on the beaches and the Martello watchtower towards the creaking iron gate, leading to the velvet grassy slopes of the secret gully of streams. A valley opening out into the secret cove of the beach of the singing winds. The sun was rising on the horizon, over the rolling waves as she raced into the white sands to bathe her broken spirits, shedding her clothing. She lay in the tidal path, letting the cold chill of the water roll over her bruised body, numbing the pain, the salt soothing the soreness in her thighs, washing away the shame, sifting the grains of sand through her fingers for solace. Then she remembered the old colonel, her friendly seal, who used to come when she sang to him round the bay and bob in the waves, curious and kindly. Was he still alive? If only she was a child again, not a confused, frightened woman at the mercy of so many conflicting emotions. For so long her voice had been silent, her throat parched and strained. There had been no songs in her heart for years. But now the chords loosened and she began to sing an old lullaby, more to rock herself to sleep than attract an audience, hugging herself for comfort. Sounds halted at first, and then soothing in their sadness. Here there was only sea and sand and sky and the pain gritting her mind. She lay amongst them like some fragile plant soaking up the morning light, watching the seabirds dancing, wishing she were dead. The music of the waves washed over her painful memories and calmed her fear. Who would understand what it was like to be at the mercy of a violent man? What was worse was that Ken was made violent by her own frailty, but to be forced into submission against her will. How could she ever forgive an act of such unspeakable humiliation? Oceans of time would never wash that first filthy act from her soul. You're no going out in this weather, Ewan. Susan McKinnon was clinging to her son as he waved from the doorway. Just a stretch at the oars in the lake to blow the cobwebs away. I'm not used to a soft bed, he replied. The atmosphere in the manse was cloying in its intensity. His unexpected presence on the doorstep had brought floods of tears and recriminations. My son is restored to me. Praise the Lord. His mother kept touching his arm, afraid he might disappear. We put your obituary in the Oban Times, and your name is carved on Agnes's headstone. Oh, son, why did you not send us a telegram or give us warning to make our preparations, and me with not a crumb in the house to give you? All the joy of preparing a welcome is taken from me. His mother's voice kept whining accusingly. There was no way of explaining away this gross error of judgment. His father's silence was worse, for he sensed some deep crisis of faith in this turn of fortune. The girl McPhee showed more faith in you being alive than I did. She clung to her resolve until I told her it was unhealthy and suggested she look elsewhere. I'm sorry, but perhaps it is for the best. This was the only comfort John McKinnon could offer. Ewan was in no mood for all this, but his mother shoved a letter in front of his face. It's from Joanna McCallum, and she's still teaching in Glasgow. She'll be thrilled to know our good news. You must write to her, for she's been a faithful friend to us over the years. Not home 5 minutes, and his mother was matchmaking, thinking he could throw off his desire for Min as easily as they had believed him dead. He spent that first restless night back on Fettrie out of doors, camping on the tip of Skerrin in his old haunt. It was better to be alone with his torment under the stars. What a fool he'd been to make the assumption that his own rescue was worth risking radio detection. He was not important enough for a special mention on the underground wireless network. He tried to explain to them why he had delayed his rescue and stayed undercover with the resistance for so long. Once the Brittany group was closed, he had simply melted back into the high ground with the rest of the group and fought on. That was what he had been trained for, after all. Nothing was turning out as he expected. The welcome at the manse, Min's anguish at his return. All those dreams of home conjured up in hours of boredom, hiding in the woods, faded into this grey, dismal reunion and the shock of Min's marriage. How many times had he sketched her face in chalks on plaster walls? Yet he was stunned once more by the beauty of those piercing sea-blue eyes. The gentle wave of her fair hair coiled discreetly in a victory roll. His fingers ached to unpin the tresses and let them splay out over her bare shoulders. She was his silver mermaid. Now another man had the honour and the right to make love to her. He wondered how she could give herself to that puny sergeant. "Why didn't you wait for me? What have we done to each other?" he yelled into the crashing waves, but his words were blown back into his face. At dawn, his eyes heavy with soul-searching, he decided to stride out over the marshy Macher to the only place where he could feel her presence. He needed to be near her in spirit before he left Fettrie, never to return. His eyes scanned across empty beach, and then he spied a speck by the shore, the outline of a shape, and raced in fear, thinking it was a body thrown from the sea. His heart pounding with relief, his prayers answered when the body stirred and rose slowly. "You've come to me. You knew where you'd be finding me if you needed me," sang his thudding heart. Min was singing, unaware of his presence. He listened and spoke softly as not to startle her. "Such a sad song you're singing to the winds. I was so hoping that you'd come. No one can chaperone us here with an egg timer. This is our place." She looked up startled, and he saw the tears and red eyes. "What am I going to do?" she cried. He sat down beside her. "I don't know, but just hold me." He ached to gather her up close to feel the warmth of her to himself, but she hung back. "I can't. There's something I have to tell you." Min's voice broke into sobs as she spilled out gulps of her unhappiness. "And I can't bear him near me. I can't be physical with him, but tonight he forced me to. What's the matter with me? I'm not normal." He sat in silence, shocked by her words, putting his arms around her shoulders gently. "I'm no doctor, but I'm sure it takes time and the right feelings. It's not your fault." How could he force you? I'll kill him for that. So, you've never actually... It was hard to speak the words in his shyness. She was shaking her head. Not once properly until... He felt his heart leap for joy. So you're still a virgin? There is no marriage if there's been no lovemaking. She had never made love to the sergeant in all this time. It was wonderful news, quickly crushed by her reply. Not anymore. It's not that simple. She was sobbing, but he had to know the truth. There were some advantages to being a minister's son when it came to marriage law. In the eyes of the church and the law, if there's no consummation, there's no marriage. You're safe from him. The marriage is null and void. You're free, he replied, not grasping her full meaning in his anxiety. Min looked up, puzzled. Even if other things happen, but not that. We're not married until we sleep together. Yun nodded. Then she burst into sobs. But tonight he forced me. That's what happened. He was angry because I do not love him and he lost patience. Tonight he broke down my defences. I'm not a virgin anymore, so I must be his legal wife. Min was flushing with embarrassment. I shouldn't be talking like this. I'll not be staying with him now. Not after this. Oh, Ewan, what a mess I've made. You must tell the lawyer, the minister, the doctor. If there was no marriage and he forced you, you should be free to walk away from him, he argued, hoping that there might still be a way out of this terrible dilemma. How can it be that simple when we've lived as man and wife and made our vows? Who would believe me? It's all changed now. Dr. Murray can examine you, he pleaded. He could give evidence for you. And have my shame over all the Oban Times for all the old Borachs to read? No, Ewan, it would shame us all. This is my fault. I'm not normal. I should never have been married. I drove him to this by my refusals. Min was staring across the water, lost in her own thoughts. Nonsense, Min. Of course you're normal. The most normal person I know. When we kissed and hugged, we both had to hold back our feelings. There's nothing wrong with you that the right man and a tender moment couldn't sort out. That man is a monster and should be punished. I shall deal with him. No, don't make matters worse. I beg you, deal with me, Ewan. Prove to me that I'm normal, that my instincts are natural. There's no one else I can trust to prove such a thing. He could see she was in earnest as she reached out to hold him. This time it must be right. But if we do make love together, we undo the proof of Ken's attack. This is getting more and more complicated. It's as if we're in some crazy dream. He was hesitating, knowing that technically if there was any adultery, her case was lost. But how could he refuse her? Min was grabbing hold of him desperately. Love me, Ewan. Show me I'm not some freak. I have to know. I have to wipe his dirt from me. Please help me. It's you that I want. I saw your face in my darkness. It has been my only comfort. I'll not be doing it to order. This is a shock to me too. It's all too soon for you. I cannot fail you in this. The time has to be right, special, relaxed. We need to find each other again. I'll no be rushed like some bullock on heat, he said, shaking her off gently, smiling though at her eagerness. If I'm going to be taking this road, then let's choose the time carefully. There must be nothing to spoil our concentration. Do you know what you're asking of me and yourself? What if it fails and I hurt you even more? How can you fail me? I've loved only you and we should have come together long ago. See, the sand is warming with the sun. Lie with me now and let us seal the bargain. Min was lying on the sand with her arms open. her hair down her back like a mermaid sunning herself on the rocks, and he was afraid. He stood up. "No, I'm not a stud horse. Wait until tonight. We'll meet by the creaking gate at dusk. Then I promise you I'll no be so quick to refuse. All day I want you to think about the pleasure it will be for us. You and I joined together, one flesh. Think of our skins touching and let your mouth water at the thought. Can you think of my touch without wincing?" "I'll try." Min smiled shyly. Min walked home slowly, knowing she must face her husband again. Her mother did not look her in the face when she arrived back, covered in sand and dishevelled. Mother must have heard all that had gone on last night, but would say nothing. "I've been chasing the cows off the vegetables again." She was lying, but she didn't care. "It was a lovely morning." "You're in a good mood all of a sudden," said Mother, eyeing her as she peeled the potatoes. Ken had done the morning chores, and Min could see he was trying to make up for last night. "A man can only take so much, love," he whispered. "We all have a breaking point. No hard feelings?" She stared at him but said nothing. "I told you it would be all right in the end." It was easy to ignore him. Nothing was going to spoil her daydreams today. Tonight she would be a real woman at long last, loving the only man she had ever desired. She would lie in Ewan's arms and feel his strength around her. But first, she must find a cover story. She would lull Ken along with her supposed change of heart and find a way to escape from his clutches. It was not going to be easy. "We can go to the Naffy to see the latest Ronald Colman film if you'd like," she suggested. "You can go and have a pint with your old mates and I'll join you later," she lied. "I have to sort my stock out and do the books for the canteen. Have a few jars and a chinwag. I won't be long," she offered, taking him off guard with her friendliness. She was shocked how easy it was to lie with a straight face. Since last night, her world had shifted on its axis. Now it was as if Ken was just a stranger to her. The terrible knowledge that they had not even been married-in-law was too awful to contemplate. In bringing him back to Fetri, she had only made her situation much worse. Yet, strangely, she felt calm and cold, as if the slate was wiped clean. If there was no marriage, then there could be no adultery. She had taken no part in his rape of her body. In her mind, there was still no marriage. Yet she could feel the jitters in her stomach. No one suspected that she was taking the canteen van out to the valley under cover of darkness, using precious petrol. Having transport would quicken the journey there and back to give them more time together. She would wear her overalls and her work clothes over her jumper and tweed skirt in case she was spotted en route. How the hours ticked by so slowly, and it still wasn't dark. She prepared Mother and Ken their favourite meal of mince and tatties cooked with carrots from the vegetable patch, but she was too nervous to eat a spoonful. She pushed them both out of the door early with a smile. Mother was off to her guild meeting at the kirk, to another of their make-do and mend sessions. Tonight would come sooner if she kept busy sorting the eggs into trays. Ewan was waiting by the wrought iron gate that led to the hidden valley of Trigunanshine, and they strolled slowly by torchlight, hand in hand, watching the last of the crimson clouds fade into purple and the moon rising in the east. She told him about the day's deceptions. "I can't believe I'm doing this. I hope one of us knows what's going to happen. What if it doesn't work?" "Who needs lessons, my silver mermaid? This is not some biology experiment," he laughed, feeling nervous and quickened their pace. He tried not to think about Ken Broderick waiting for his wife in the canteen. That man had forfeited all his rights when he raped his wife. She belonged only to him, sealed by Agnes's death, both bound together in her loving memory. "It's hardly the weather for rolling in the sand, is it?" said Min, her hands cold in his grasp. He could feel the wind flapping through his trousers. "Have patience, all is prepared. Have faith, young lady. Anyone would think you're impatient to get going." He hugged her tightly. "I want it to be right for us, this first time." He led her towards the side of the Trigunnan shrine, where during the afternoon he had constructed a little bothy of greenery over 2 large boulders, a hidden cave lined with a ground sheet and a tartan rug with even a pillow. There was a flask and glasses and a small lantern waiting. "Your bower awaits, my lady. It's not exactly the Cranach." He paused, hoping she would see the funny little snug and relax. "It's lovely. All my world's in this beach. It's better than any 4-poster bed in Oban. The laird himself couldn't find a better trysting place. So sheltered with a lovely view and a friend who's the best company in the world to me. It's lovely. Where shall I sit?" she said, plonking herself down eagerly. "First, you sip the cognac, brought from my own fair hand from the perils of France. We must toast all the good allies who sheltered me there. Then you nibble a petticoat tail biscuit in memory of the old alliance between Scotland and France. I'm sorry there's no music," he laughed, "but we'll make do with the lap of the waves and the whistle of the winds." "That'll do me fine," she replied, lying back on her elbow. He could see Min was shivering as she sat down, her courage beginning to fail her. As if reading her thoughts, he sat down, wrapping them both together in an old blanket. He held her close. "When I was holed up in the forests, I used to dream of this place, of this moment. The wind would be singing and the waves lapping. Next, I'm after telling how I've always loved you from the first day when I was teaching you to swim. The walls of all my hiding places in France were covered with sketches of your face. You were my inspiration." He told her how in hiding he had rediscovered his love of drawing. "You're the only woman I shall ever want, and just how much I love you I'll be showing you. Don't cry. Enjoy this time, the first of many, I hope. Have another sip of brandy. It'll calm your fears. We shall learn together what our loving is all about. I'm going to lie down with you and let my hands run over you gently. If you're afraid, tell me and I'll stop. And you can touch me slowly, slowly, gently, Bentley. Let's see how far we can travel. Let me take away the pain and the bad memory of last night. Let's heal the wounds together." He kissed her softly and whispered in her ear, making her smile and relax, feeling himself roused by the trust in her eyes as they flickered in the lantern light. "Let's take the first steps on our path, taking our time. There's no rushing our journey." For Min, it was like a gentle ache in her loins as she pulled Ewan closer into her. A gush of warm feelings flooded over her, as if she was a child dancing on the beach, dipping in and out of the warm sea. For a second, she felt that old familiar tensing of muscles, but by looking deep into Ewan's eyes, seeing the trust and gentleness of his concern, she found the courage to let go of the fear. Moved to the rhythm of his lovemaking until she was rolling down, down, letting the waters flood over her, soaking her. There was no fear. "My love," she cried, the tears pouring. It was so simple, so effortless, so wonderful, and he was inside her. There was no pain and no resistance from her body. "Now I'm really yours." She was weeping with relief. "I'm normal. Thank you. I'll love you for always and forever for this. No more broken promises. Ewan, my dear, dear love." They lay in the moonlight, content and at 1. Ewan stared up at the sky, counting the stars. Now they belonged together, and no man on this earth would tear them apart. She was no longer another man's wife, but sealed and bound only to his tender care. They were meant to be together in this life. She was the face that had kept him alive all those months ago. Now she was part of him, part of the wind and the stars and the magic of this island. You are my light, my sunrise and sunset. No one can separate us now but ourselves. Min put her finger on his lips. Don't say that. I know we must part and I must face Ken and my mother, but he'll never sleep in my bed again. I promise you, I'll find a way. We must find a way to be together. You know my leave will end and I must go abroad, but there's no reason why we both can't go south and leave all this behind. He was talking with his heart, not with his head. It would be simple to run away and shame all who were left behind. Your parents will be heartbroken. There will be shame for all of them. Min was reading his very thoughts before him. We can be discreet. There must be a way to do this so no one gets hurt. If that man goes back to his base on the mainland, you can promise to follow him this time, but come south with me. No one needs suspect until it is all done and too late to alter. We can't be separated again. This had to be the safest bet. If you're sure. There was hesitation in her voice. Nothing has ever gone right for us before. Until tonight. This'll be our first of 100 nights of loving. We have the rest of our lives to be together and share our future. All our old promises are coming true at last. It's all going to be different from now on. When he looked at his wristwatch, it was after 11 o'clock. Hellfire, you're going to be late. Straighten yourself, darling. If we take the old track, we might just get to the barracks in time for the end of the picture show. But I've hidden my van on the roadside outside Ballinasser. There's no need to panic. This is the most wonderful night of my life, and I don't want it ever to end. When can we do it again? Min sighed. Min, if you run away with me now, we can go hammer and tongs at it for the rest of our lives. First, let's be getting you home without arousing suspicion. Everything must be thought through. Will you come away with me when my leave ends? You know what I'm asking of you. He kissed her on the lips to seal their promise, and the wind whipped the grasses from the shelter. It was time to head for home. There was nothing like the first time with a woman, he sighed. Together, the two of them had wiped all the past loathing and fear from her mind by their tender lovemaking. No other lover had ever ignited such a force within him. They were brief, drunken couplings, but here on Fetri, under the stars, there was magic in the air. Chapter 10. Min returned quietly to Kilfetrish and slept in the chair by the fire. She did not want to disturb Ken as he lay prostrate over the bed in a drunken sleep. She sat in the flickering firelight, looking at the lines etched on his puffy face, the wavy line of his moustache, the middle parting of his slicked down hair. His mouth was gaping. He had been waiting to challenge her late return, but a drunken stupor had overtaken him. Min felt no guilt, no remorse, no shame, only a sad emptiness inside. How could she have ever found him attractive? Their reconciliation had been ruined by Ewan's return. The whole episode seemed a disastrous mistake, and the sooner she ended his misery, the better. When both men were off the island, she would sort out how to leave discreetly and forever. First, she must pretend to resume her old life, while preparing for a new life with Ewan, scrub away the dirt of this sorry relationship as if it had never happened. How easy to say, but how hard it would be to accomplish. No one need know the circumstances of their separation. If necessary, she would seek work on the mainland away from prying eyes and gossip. She could disappear into a big city where Ken would never find her. On their journey back to Kilfetrish, Ewan had talked of art college, of training as a teacher, of developing the side of him that had lain dormant so many years, now stirred by his experiences in France. He talked briefly of his escapades, and she was enthralled. She sensed he was censoring all the bits that would disturb her. Dear, kind Ewan, always trying to protect her. Now it was time for her to support him in his chosen career. There must be domestic work somewhere close to the college that would bring in some money. As long as they were together, she would scrub stairs and wash sheets. They would take on the world and win. Now she was courting sleep, but it would not come to her. Too many schemes were dancing around her head. She curried under the scratchy blanket and dozed fitfully, rising at first light to see to her chores, feeding the hens and ducks, pumping water from the well. With luck, Ken would be making his way back to the ferry. His leave was over and she couldn't wait to see the back of him. If only she hadn't begged for him to come back and start again. Why was her timing always so out of kilter? It was as if there was a curse on ever doing anything at the proper time. But she pushed this morbid thought to the back of her mind. There was enough to think about, just getting Ken out of the house and out of her life. He must leave without a fuss. He was grumpy when he woke, half-dressed with a hangover, half recalling she had not been home when he returned. "Where were you last night?" he accused. "I came back by the shore path with a headache. I was feeling tired and I knew you'd be enjoying yourself. There you were, half seas over the bed. I didn't have the heart to wake you," she explained, half believing her own words. He was looking at her with one eyebrow raised, as if to ask a question. "You said you'd come to meet me. Where were you?" "Ugh, it all took longer than I thought. And then the van was playing up, so I tinkered with it and took it for a test run. I knew I'd missed the main picture and I felt so awful I thought some fresh air would clear my head," she said, turning from him to hide her flushed cheeks. Lies did not sit easily upon her this morning. "Come on, or you'll miss the boat. I'll walk you down." "There's no need to wave me off today. I know it upsets you. I'll write to you. You see to your own work. I'm sorry this wasn't the leave we planned," he said, not looking at her as he laced his boots. She was busy brushing his jacket. It smelled of the mess and smoke. "Thank you, ma'am, when she comes in for another cheery visit," he said, and she knew it was his turn to lie now. Mother had not spoken a word to him since that terrible night. He nodded in the direction of the door and pecked her on the cheek. "Be seeing you, love, and think on. I only did it for the best. Now it's all sorted, we can get down to married life like a couple of lovey-doves." How could he pretend that nothing had happened between them? How could he think that all was well between them? She gave him a perfunctory kiss on the cheek and gathered up his clothes into his kit bag. She wanted nothing left of him in the cottage. There was no loving feelings left for him in her heart. Only this eagerness to see him away from the island for good. How could she have married this little man? Only the heart sees clearly, she thought. And my heart was blinded by grief and fear, snatching at affection and calling it love. Now she was free of him. She could never make that mistake again. They walked down the Macher towards the harbour along the coastal path, and she waved him towards the waiting ferry until he was out of sight. She turned back, skipping across the grass to the stone house, slamming the door with relief. Thank God he was gone. Tonight she could meet Ewan in peace with no fear of intrusion. Nothing would stop their lovemaking now. Yet some vague uneasiness haunted her all day. It started when she found her van disturbed and dirty footprints on her clean floor. Her cash box and accounts had been shifted around. Someone had been in her mobile, but nothing was missing. The cash float was correct enough. The cigarettes still tallied and the sweets on the tray untouched. Who was checking up on her work? That feeling of unease lifted, but she kept peering up and down the road to see if she was being observed. Perhaps the authorities had reason to believe she was not doing her rounds efficiently, but the roads were just full of their usual carts and transport trucks. She stopped at the corners of farm tracks and the airbase as usual, laughing away her jitters, chattering to her customers. The tracks were bare with few bends and boulders, but she sensed a presence lurking just behind them, a shadow that was unnerving her. This was her own guilty conscience stalking her. Her love for Ewan was making her devious and shifty. She would have to learn to live with it from now on. It was a relief to see Ewan waiting patiently at dusk. All those silly misgivings were pushed to the back of her mind. There was no one left on Fetri now who would wish them ill. It was stupid to think their loving might not be discovered, but tonight was for them alone. Ewan had been helping with the kelp harvest, gathering the seaweed from the shore at low tide, loading it onto carts and barrows to be spread to dry under a shower of black flies. He had always liked to lend a hand and make himself useful on leave. Now he was sweaty and ready for a swim. "You smell like a midden," she laughed as she hugged him. Nothing could harm her when Ewan was by her side. "Come and swim with me then." He was racing her down the gully to the secret cove. "It'll be freezing," she replied. "I'll soon warm you up." They flung off their shoes and dipped into the icy water, but it was too full and rough for anything more than a quick exit. Ewan dunked himself headfirst, and Min rubbed him down with his towel, chittering with cold and excitement. They chased each other over the grass like wild children playing tag, yelling into the moonlight. No one ever came here at night. They lay on the soft grass in a hollow, counting the shooting stars as they streaked across the night sky, picking out the constellations on this clear autumn night. It was a perfect night for lovemaking, slow and tender, fast and furious. There was so much lost time to make up. How could she ever have thought herself frigid and unfeeling when lovemaking was so natural with Ewan? Locked in each other's arms, they rolled down the slope, lost in a world of their own, until a voice yelled out and a torch speared them with its bright light. "Stop that malarkey! Get off my wife, you fucking slut! You thought you could fool me, but I knew you were up to something behind my back, like a randy bitch on heat." The voice was croaking, rasping, struggling to spit out the words as if the emotions were taking the very breath away. Min went rigid at the sound of Ken's voice. He was standing above them, staring down at their nakedness, gasping for breath. So her instinct was right. "It's you who's been following me. It was you in the shadows. I never thought you'd be a spy. Oh, Ken, why didn't you go?" She was screeching into the darkness. "I had to know. I'm not stupid. You lied to me last night. I went to meet you, but the van was missing, and you were nowhere to be seen. You weren't doing no bookkeeping. This was what you was up to, with Loverboy. So I set a trap, and you fell right in it, you bitch." He was striding down the grass, waving his torch. Ewan stood, pulling up his trousers, calling into the light, shocked, but his voice was threatening. "Calm down, Sergeant Broddick. Your marriage is over. It was over before and after what you put her through. It's over. You have to understand. I'm sorry. Min is mine. She always was." Min's eyes were straining to make out the outline of Ken clutching his chest. gasping out his words. "You'll be bloody sorry when I've finished with you both. It's my wife you're shagging. She'll cheat you like she cheated me. All those phony excuses. I can't do it, it hurts. She's been shagging half the airbase behind my back. Can't get enough of it, stringing me along with a pack of lies." He was wheezing badly now, struggling for breath. Min wrapped a towel around herself, anxious to go to his aid. But he was stepping back from her. "I'm not standing for it." He was gasping out his words. "You're my wife, so you'd better come back to me with Wigan, right now. My mam'll sort you out, good and proper. You'll do as you're told. I'm your husband, for God's sake. No one makes a fool out of Ken Broddick." "You're making a fool of yourself right now if you think I'm going anywhere with you," she was screaming at him. "I hate you. You shamed me. I was never your wife legally. We were never physical enough. It was never a proper marriage. Not ever, and I never loved you. Go away and leave us be. It's over between us." "Rubbish. If Lazarus here hadn't come back from the bleeding dead, you'd be glad enough to take my wages and call yourself my wife. You just want some sucker to provide for you, you lazy slut. Pull the other one. Whiter than white. My Aunt Fanny. You're not a virgin, and that's for sure. Don't talk so daft." Ken was still gasping for breath, but as he stepped in closer to pull at Min's arm, Ewan stood between them. "Don't touch her. I don't want anyone hurt, Sergeant. This has to be sorted out calmly. Now's not the time to do it. We can go back and talk this all through." Ewan's voice was hard. "Don't you give me orders as when's the right time to talk. I've got you by the short and curlies. Lieutenant, shagging my wife, silly. She deserves a slapping, the little whore," Ken shouted, lunging forward again, but Ewan grabbed him. "Don't you lay a finger on her again, you bully. I'm warning you. This is between you and me," Ewan replied. Ken was struggling for his breath. "She's trouble, that one. Trouble all the way. A bitch who looks like butter wouldn't. I came back to give her a second chance, and now I've gone AWOL to save my marriage. But she's not worth the bother, is she? She's trouble. You stay out of my business, mate, if you know what's good for you." With one lurch, Ken threw himself at Min, blinding her with his torchlight. She stepped back, but he lurched again, so instinctively she pushed him from her. Ken slipped sideways, tottering for a second with a look of surprise on his stricken face, as his torch launched itself from his hand and he fell backwards into the air, down the slope, hard onto the rocky outcrop below. They could hear him in the darkness as he lay stunned, gasping and wheezing for breath. The choking and wheezing bubbled in the darkness as the lovers scrambled down blindly to find him. "He's having a wheezing fit. We've got to help him or he'll stop breathing. Where's he fallen? I can't hear him," yelled Min in panic, knowing the sides of the cove were slippery and treacherous. They searched with the thin torch beam until they found him on the rocks, his head gashed and bleeding, but the choking rasps were faint and bubbling now. "Raise his head and feel for a pulse," ordered Ewan, and Min shone the torch in Ken's face to see his eyes staring unblinking at her. "What should we do?" Ewan was thrashing through his survival knowledge. "We've got to get him air, but he's not breathing now. Oh God, I think he's choked. We can't let him die. We've got to do something. I'll run and get help, but I've no shoes on. Where are my shoes?" Min was panicking now. She was floundering in some terrible nightmare of her own making. She heard Ewan's cold voice and knew it was useless. "It's no use. He's dead, Min. There's no pulse. There's nothing anyone can do for him now." Ewan was sitting back on his knees, with his head bowed as she crouched beside him. "But he can't be dead. Do something. Carry him back to the van. Call the constable. We have to save him." "No. We'll let the sea take him," he whispered. "It's the kindest way out for all of us." "But we can't do that. His mother, his sisters, they're expecting him back." Min heard her own voice squeaking feebly. "They will raise the alarm. I don't think he was planning to leave until tomorrow, do you? Let the sea have him. It can sort out all this mess better than we can ever do, Mugwai. But I pushed him and he fell. I killed him. Oh, Ewan, what have I done? She felt so weary, exhausted, stunned into inertia. This is Agnes all over again. Are we never to be allowed our happiness? Is it to be blighted by death and the vengeance of the sea? I can't bear this. I didn't want this to happen to him, she sobbed. It's all my doing. Look, it was an accident. Nobody's to blame. He was wheezing and he slipped. He was already too breathless and unfit to clamber over rocks in the dark. It was a tragic accident. But it was all our fault, she cried. We killed him. No, we didn't. You mustn't say that, do you hear me? He followed you and saw something that he didn't want to see. It triggered off a breathing attack. He should have left you alone. That was his choice. It was an accident, and we can report it later if you like. Ewan was shaking her. How can you be so cold? We've killed him. He saw us together and it killed him. Her voice was shrill and hysterical, and he slapped her cheek. Shut up. Calm down. That man raped you, or have you forgotten? You wanted rid of him, and so did I. He brought this upon himself. No one knows he came here. As far as you know, he left today on the steam ferry back to his depot. That's all there is to it. If we push him off the rocks, he'll float away. The sea will see to him. Then no one gets hurt. Then you are free from his clutches for good. Don't you see? This is for the best. What's the point of dragging others into this mess? This way it's clean and finished. I'll go away as I planned. You can stay here and see what happens later. No one will suspect. It was an accident. Come and help me drag him down to the sea. They dragged his body out of the wedge where it lay and pulled him to the edge of the rocks. Ewan threw the broken torch into the sea. Min was shaking as she watched him ruthlessly straighten Ken's uniform. Don't do that. I'll see to him, she whispered. What are we doing but acting as if we murdered him, disposing of his body like this? How can you be so cold and calm? I don't know you, Yundu. She turned from him, but he spat his words in her face. I've seen far worse things than this in war. I've seen executions and killings. Don't ask what else I've seen. This time, I tell you, no one was to blame. He's dead, and nothing changes that. I won't let him spoil our chance of a future together. Give him to the sea. Trust the sea. It knows best. 3 things it will do for us. It will throw him on the rocks, or drag him down under the waves, or carry him far out into the ocean to feed the fishes. Let the sea decide for us. Come on, there's no time to waste now while we have darkness to cover us. But he's my husband. I can't just leave him on the cold rocks. Min was weeping, trying to button up Ken's uniform, straighten out his limbs and wash the blood from his face. Then we'll lower him onto the water when the tide turns. We'll say some proper words and you can sing a hymn and give him an honest sea burial, if that makes you feel any better. That's all we can do for him now, Ewan answered coldly. She was stunned into silence by the hardness of her hero's words. There was a steel edge to this man she had never seen before. From this rock-like strength must have come the will to evade captivity. He had seen battle and death before, and it had changed him, separating him from her. She was not sure of this hard Ewan, but he was strong now for both of them, and she was crumbling fast. Yet her heart was sad as they prepared Ken for his watery burial. A surge of raw pity washed over Min as she bent over and kissed his forehead, closing his eyes in a silent farewell. She stroked his brown hair back how he liked it, buttoning up his pockets, taking nothing from his uniform. She wanted nothing more from him but his name for a while. Then they stood as Min clung to Ken one last time, waiting for the turn of the tide, the moonlight catching his body as it rose and swelled, ready to be launched out on the water. Ewan stood with bowed head and repeated the only bits of the burial service he could remember in Gaelic. We commit this body to the deep, to be turned into corruption. looking for the resurrection of the body when the sea shall give up its dead. Both of them were praying that this was one corpse that would sink down to the bottom of the sea, never to return. Min clasped hold of Ken's cold hand in a lingering gesture of both guilt and kindness, holding it like a mother grasping the hand of her wandering child. She sang 2 verses of the sad widow's lament, Giragol Criach. Her voice crumbled into a sob as Ewan pushed him out into the sea of everlasting sleep, into the sea without a shore, on the final journey to Tir na Nog, land of the ever-young. They watched silently as he floated away like a buoy, bobbing on the surface. There was a crumb of comfort in the dignity of this departure, the softness of the gentle waves as they caressed their charge. It was the best they could do, and she knew many a poor fisherman had never even had such a burial as this. If only you'd taken the ferry, she wept. How different things would have been then. They returned to their lair, dressing slowly, and sat watching long into the darkness. We mustn't meet again, Ewan. Not on Fetri. Not until all this has died down. I cannot take it in, she said. I suppose you're right, he whispered. Better not to tempt fate now. The sooner we both forget what happened here, the sooner we can begin our life again. You're free now to marry where you will. You must go home and prepare to play the abandoned wife, or the grieving widow, as the case may be. There's no need to rush now. I'll return to my unit and see out my commission. I'll be sent overseas, but there's nothing to stop us sending postcards and letters to each other as friends. There must be no other collusion between us. When the time is right, I'll come for you, dear heart. I'm so sorry. Why is the time always out of joint for us? Some day soon it must come right. His voice sounded far away, but she felt so exhausted she could hardly move her aching limbs. This separation now would be a just punishment for all that had happened. She would never come back here to the beach of the singing winds again unless Ewan was by her side. She was afraid that Ken's ghost would always be lying in wait to accuse her of a terrible treachery. In the weeks following Ken's death, she was physically sick with worry. It was hard to eat or sleep. Min went about her duties like an automaton. There was no show of emotion, no crying fits when Ken's mother wrote asking why her son had gone AWOL, and the military police were at her door. Her mother was watching her like a hawk, but she did everything as planned. She wrote to his family saying she had heard nothing from her husband since he took the SS Hebrides back to Oban. The only lie was about his visit being like a second honeymoon, and he had left smiling. She insisted that there could be no suggestion of desertion, and put the thought in their minds to contact the hospitals in case there was some bomb incident or some such accident on his way home. She even contacted the constable, and he made a note that her husband was reported missing. She waited in a terror of guilt and anguish, not daring to reply to Ewan when he sent a brief postcard with a BFPO address abroad. Hours went by scouring the coastline and the tides waiting for a sighting of Ken's body, washed up in some crevice, but the sea held its secret. Dreams were punctuated with his staring eyes, flashing before her eyelids, those frightening eyes, wide open, so full of accusation. The sound of his last wheezing breaths rang in her ears, making her dizzy until she vomited with disgust on the grass. Mother rallied from her usual lethargy as news of his disappearance began to register. There was military policemen and the local constable making inquiries, and Ailey was able to confirm that she had been one of the last people to see her son-in-law the night before he left for the ferry. To her credit, she said nothing of the quarrel or the terrible events of Min's struggling marriage. Only her amber eyes flickered questioningly in her direction now and then as she sat knitting socks by the fire, as if she was half wondering if Ken's disappearance could be laid at her daughter's feet. In truth, Min needed no script to play the grieving wife, for she was racked with guilt and fear. Gradually, it was dawning that without Ken's body, there would be no widowhood, not for many years. The court demanded years of waiting before declaring him dead. She would not be free to marry Yun for a long time. Fetri would have to be both prison and refuge from the coming storms ahead. The love of her life was gone, and the pain was unbearable. Her only true friend, and she had sent him away. It had seemed the best option at the time. They were living in a world where convention mattered, and she didn't want to harm his reputation, or her own, what little there was of it. The island was so hidebound by respectability. They must each keep to their silent pact, and no one would be the wiser. Weeks passed, and she took to watching the tide, hoping Ken would be returned, and she would be free at last, but the sea still held its secret. Sometimes she thought she could hear Yun's voice on the wind, calling to her, but it was just the scream of the seabird. He was gone from view, and she must wait until the faintness and the aching passed over, until she could breathe again. Chapter 11. Fetri, 1945. Is that you puking up again, Mogoi? Ailey caught Min retching into a bucket. It must be the scallops. Too rich for my stomach. She turned, seeing a strange look on her mother's face. It's a gay funny fish that has you puking every morning and night, and me without a bust of wind in my innards. Give it a few more months and it'll be swimming in your stomach ready to make its way into the world, I'm after thinking. Mother was laughing and shaking her head. What do you mean? She gasped. What goes up has to come down in its own good time, lassie. Did you no reckon you could be with child? I thought it was all the upset with not hearing from Ken for weeks that had upset my system, she blushed. I don't know what to think. Surely not. Her heart was sinking at the thought. There was no joy in knowing she was carrying a child, and with it the awful thought that only God alone knew whose child it might be. It made her retch with fear. Surely not. In the confines of a small cottage, nothing could hide her growing condition from her mother's eagle eye, as quietly she took up knitting needles and prepared for her daughter's confinement. Poor fatherless bairn it may be. Not the first or the last, but the Lord has softened your grief, child, whispered her mother. This was going to be a piece of good news to blow in the wind. Min went about her daily work with a heavy heart. No one on the island would begrudge a grieving widow this gift of life, but an adulteress giving birth to a bastard was a different matter. She felt sick with apprehension and guilt. Then Ewan's mother, Susan, died suddenly of a stroke, and his father took another post on the mainland, unaware of Min's condition. All her connections with Ewan were being severed. He was unable to return for the funeral now that he was serving in the Far East, so Min paid her respects and showed the minister postcards from Ewan. Still no news of your husband, he said. It's a sad business, and no mistake. He seemed such a decent young man. His family must be sore distressed. We know that feeling only too well, do we not, lass? This only made her feel worse. She had only written once to his family, to tell them of his sudden disappearance, but not of her pregnancy. She wanted none of them staking a claim on this baby, whatever the outcome. As far as she was concerned, that part of her life was over. The hardness of her resolve shook her. She was becoming like this island, remote, inaccessible, with few harbours to shelter in. with a heart hewn from Fretry rock. The months that followed Ewan's departure were dreich winter months of storms and gales, when the island was pounded by swollen waves and gales. She made preparations for the birth, but her nightmares were filled with visions of Ken's body rising from the deep, walking over the water, screaming out, "Adulterer!" to haunt her, invading her body with a sweating terror. "You've a beautiful daughter, Mrs. Broddick. Hold her close." The midwife smiled, and the exhausted mother, sweating, turned her face from her child at first. "Come now, think yourself lucky you've got such a bonny bairn." The screaming infant was shoved onto her breast to suckle, and Min cried with the pain of her efforts. In the last month, she had left for the mainland to stay with a distant cousin until she went into the small nursing home in Oban, using the last of her savings to pay for her care. The baby wailed, but still Min daren't look down at her face. She wanted no permanent reminder of Ken's treachery, but instinct made her curious. The baby's head was covered in dark, soft down, and when her eyes opened, they were navy blue, fringed with dark lashes, so unlike her own fairness. Her heart leapt with emotion at the sight of such a beauty. She unfurled the fronds of her long fingers, examined each toe. The little face was screwed up with rage at being torn from the comfort and warmth of a womb into this cold world. A flood of love poured into Min for this tiny creature, born of passion or shame. She knew not which. How she wished she could share this joy with someone. But the only man who mattered was halfway across the world. How could she tell him about this daughter if she was not his child? In the afternoon after the birth, she sat up in bed to write him a long letter. I have called her More Anna. Don't ask me why, but I like the sound of it, and it being the better half of my own given name. She is so beautiful, so different to myself. A delight to behold, for I imagine I'm holding you in my arms. The letter lay by her bedside, and was never sent. What purpose would there be in misleading him? There had been enough deceit already. It was better that the child was accepted just as Anna Broddick. It kept them all safer that way. There was no turning back from what was done that night to Ken, and she must protect this bairn from the truth of her parentage. She didn't want Ewan to catch the first boat back from the Far East to claim this child and stir up a scandal of suspicion on Fetry. It would be better if their reunion was delayed, to take place out of sight of local gossips. Only time would tell if Anna was a McKinnon or not. It was going to be a struggle to make ends meet now that Ken's pay was stopped on the presumption that he was a deserter. But Min had already calculated how much they would need to survive, and there was now a small allowance for single mothers. The sparkle in her eyes vanished, with tiredness and sleepless nights, to be replaced by a flintier gaze. The war was over at long last. There was a new feeling of optimism in the air and hopes for a better future for children, but restrictions were worse than ever. She could not help herself dreaming dreams for her daughter as she rocked her in her arms. I want more for you than a shabby cottage next to a byre and a shawl to carry you around like some tinker's child, she thought. It was time to leave the island, time for them both to leave all the terrible events of the past months behind here. You are my responsibility now, and we can do better for ourselves on the mainland, I'm sure. It's not fair to rely on Ewan to bail us out of trouble. It's better to do this by ourselves. McPhee women have relied on men's promises for far too long. Time now to seek employment somewhere where we'll be just a war widow and her child, doing the only work I'm trained for, hard though it'll be. She gazed up to the mantelpiece, to her one precious porcelain figurine. I want you to be dressed in silks, with leather shoes that fit on your feet and books to read. She pointed the baby to the little china doll. I want you to have all the things I never had, and the opportunities you'll not be getting in this out-of-the-way place. We can't wait for Ewan to return. What if he's injured or worse? Time for your mammy to go back into service, she sighed. Time for us to move away from Fetri and make a new life. Just the two of us. So you're going then? Ailey watched Min scouring the Oban Times for positions vacant. Now your Uncle Niall's got himself a Glasgow wife and seat by her fire. He'll be in no hurry to return. What's to become of me? Poor abandoned soul that I am. How can a daughter not do her duty and take me with her to mind the bairn? She was pleading. Min stood firm, not wanting Anna's head filled with her mother's Highland nonsense. This must be a fresh start for both of them. You're strong enough when it suits you, Mother. Now there'll only be your own mouth to feed, and the hens in the garden will fill your pot. I'll send what I can, but there's nothing for me here on Fetri now. I've counted 6 situations vacant in the Oban Times. I'm writing to register with a domestic agency in Edinburgh. There must be plenty of country homes wanting a housekeeper, willing to offer accommodation to a widow. Anna must be brought up on the mainland. It's all decided. Ailey looked up from her knitting, her round spectacles at the end of her nose. You've grown mighty cold this past year. Grief's not softened the mouth on you, but the black becomes your colouring, I have to admit. It's a hard world out there for a servant. Mark my words. I know only too well that you're not safe off the island, Mogoy. It'll all end in tears. What are you talking about? It's hardly been safe for me here, she snapped impatiently. It was always the same old story of doom and gloom and wicked masters and poor, helpless serving girls. This is 1945, Mother. Things are different now after all we've been fighting for. The future is ours for the taking. No more of your warnings. Wish us well. We'll come back whenever we can. I have to think of the bairn. And here's me thinking you'd settle with Ewan Dhu, but he's vanished like poor Ken Broddick, over the water to goodness knows where. You frighten all your suitors away. I don't understand you. Ailey was rocking the baby as she spoke. You have a hard mother. Ewan will return when he's good and ready. Who knows what might happen for us both then? Better not to lose a tide or make plans too far ahead. That's one thing I'm learning in this life. Take your chances when they come. Live for today and not tomorrow. Tomorrow may never come. Min patted her mother's leathery hand. Aye, you're right enough there. Who knows what's round the next corner for you? Better not to know, I'm thinking. Only the good Lord knows what's in store, and he makes the back for the burden. When the letter arrived from the Pitlandry house, in the autumn of 1945, inviting Mrs. Broddick to take up a post as live-in maid, with accommodation provided in-house, she did not hesitate to accept the position. She asked her old dominee for a reference, and borrowed the school atlas to find just where Pitlandry was to be found, in the borders of Scotland. It was close to the town of Peebles, and the River Tweed in the lowlands, far enough away to make a clean break from all the sadness of the past year. Only then did she write to Ewan telling him of her change of circumstances. But of Anna, she said not a word. What he didn't know wouldn't harm him, she reasoned. It was all turning out for the best. She would write to him when she was settled, and when she knew for certain that Mor'Anna was his child. Part 2. Blow the wind southerly, 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 blow bonny breeze o'er the bonny blue sea. Blow the wind southerly, 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 blow bonny wind and bring him to me. Chapter 1. Pitlandry House, 1945 to 1946. Look, Anna, see the sheep and the horses in the fields. We're on our way at last, away from the rough sea on the puffer train. Min was dangling her baby on her knee, looking out of the carriage window, her heart racing with excitement at the thought they would have a new home in the Borders. She was sitting opposite a young sailor who snored all the way to Glasgow. The train was packed with troops, sitting in the corridors, smoking and playing cards, and eyeing her up with interest. They could stare all they liked, for she was finished with romance. From now on, her head would rule her heart in the same way it dictated that she still wouldn't tell Ewan about her baby. It was better to rely only on herself to provide for them both. This was to be a fresh start and no looking back. She would always love Ewan, but they were not free to be together yet. She must prove worthy of his love and trust in her. Her eyes flitted to the sailor's kit bag, dangling precariously from the shelf above, with a tag which read HMS and nothing else. No one showed the name of their ship. Min kept glancing back at the label. What was the missing name? She was never called by her Sunday name, Mary. Why had she stuck with Min all these years? Who wanted to own up to a name that sounded like a well-known household polish? Now she was back in service. She could be any name she liked. Perhaps a new name would distance her from Fetri, from island gossip, adding a touch of mystique. Perhaps not. For Anna's sake, she would certainly stay Brodick. She sat daydreaming out of the carriage window, recalling that first dreadful journey south on her honeymoon. Just thinking about Ken made her shiver with guilt and fear. This journey must be a fresh start. The past was the past, and there was no going back. Anna slept fitfully in her arms as the train chugged on through the grandeur of lochs and glens towards the outskirts of Glasgow. Soon it was time to alert the guard and go in search of her case and battered pushchair. As Min alighted from the train, with the help of many pairs of hands, she sniffed the soot and the smoke and saw the bustle of passengers rushing for connections. She took a deep breath. "You've done it, McGoey. You've put all the bad luck behind you. From now on, it can only get better. A new start deserves a new name. So onwards and upwards, Mary Brodick." Min stopped to gaze out of the window of the bus, to the Christmas card beauty of the fir trees dripping with fresh snow, as they stepped down in Pitlandry to walk the last few yards to the house. A robin hopped on the dripping branches, flicking them with wet snow, and Anna screamed with delight as they walked through the wrought iron gate, down the slushy path between the lawns, gazing at a soft rise of hills and fir trees frosted with icing. She crossed her fingers as she took that first look at Pitlandry House for good luck. She could still not believe her good fortune in finding a position in such lovely countryside. The house nestled in a hollow beside a rolling tributary of the River Tweed, a fine stone house built in the 18th century for a family of merchants, secluded, set back from a minor road by an avenue of tall poplars. She was coming as a domestic help to Colonel Herbert Lennox and his ailing wife, Dorinda, who were renting this rambling old mansion with only a local cook and gardener and some sporadic daily help. It was obvious as soon as she arrived that this place was far too big for the couple. It was proving hard to cling on to pre-war standards without adequate heating and with all the restrictions of post-war rationing and little help. Her appointment was made through the agency by their son, without even giving Min an interview. Her job was to make sure that the house did not freeze his parents with the chill. Young Mr. Lennox had written explaining that his parents were too frail now to adapt to change, and while he was away on business, he wanted to be sure they did not neglect themselves. His sister lived in London and would visit when she could. Min's experience with Lady Rose so many years ago had swung the position in her favour. This is not a post for some old trout. I want someone young and energetic, who will not mind the draughts and the chills. You may burn as many logs as is necessary to keep them safe, and your young child too. It will do the folks good to hear a baby around the place. She suspected that no other applicant wanted to be stuck out so far from buses and comforts in such inhospitable surroundings. But this hideaway was going to suit them both fine. The Lennoxes were a charming couple who staggered up and down the dusty staircase among dingy, dog-haired sofas, trying to keep up Edwardian standards with virtually no staff. Min drew a deep breath and set about spring-cleaning all their living rooms, beating carpets and rugs choking in the dust of years. She found the old nursery bucket pram, and Anna was sat up to supervise all the sponging downs and vacuuming with Edie Laurie, her devoted slave, who came twice a week from the village to do the rough work. Min was so busy those first weeks after her arrival that there was no time to dwell on the past year's tragic events. Her job was to organise the household, see to the deliveries and the everyday running of Pitlandry, until such time as the Colonel's army son, Henry, returned from his regiment. She was given a small cottage attached to the old stables. For the first time in her life, Min had her own space and was told to furnish it from some of the rooms in the old servants' quarters in the house. She distempered the walls and polished up the stone floors, found rugs and a table and chairs, a bed and washstand, and even a wooden cot for Anna. It was like being given the key to a treasure trove of riches. In the evening, she had her own kitchen fireplace to hug and the choice of any books from the Colonel's library. Sometimes she kept pinching herself to see if all this was not some dream that they had wandered into by mistake. One of the first things she did was to set her figurine proudly on the mantelpiece. It had survived the journey intact, wrapped in woolen baby clothes. She wanted everyone to see she knew the genuine article. There was no electricity, no modern conveniences. But then, this was no different to conditions on Fetri. Here, though there was privacy to wander through the woods and by the river and feed the horses in the fields, and she could jump on carts to get lifts to town. She found the Colonel's motor sitting on bricks in the garage, so she hinted to them that she had driven vans for years, and Mrs. Lennox suggested they might license their car again. This would enable her to chauffeur them into town for appointments and fling herself round the stores while they took afternoon tea in the Pitlandry Hotel. Min began to enjoy a freedom from worry and shame for the first time in years. So much so, she was even reluctant to boast in her infrequent letters to Ewan the dramatic change in her fortunes. It was too soon for them to meet up. Much as she loved him, the birth of a child and Ken's death on those rocks had shattered something precious between them. Something she was finding it hard to define. In the silence of the night, in her heart of hearts, she knew Ken's disappearance must have caused his family such grief and puzzlement. She alone could have put them out of their misery, but it was too late now, without raising suspicion of them both. Ewan was part of the Fetri conspiracy, and Fetri had no place here in Pitlandry. There were no reminders here of her secret past. Here there was peace and beauty to share with Anna. All that had delighted her in the Crannog was here in abundance. The fine porcelain and glass cabinets, beautiful furniture to polish and examine closely, the gracious proportions of each room with walls lined with portraits and hunting scenes. It would be her joy to restore it all to its former glory, to fill the bowls with evergreens and flowers, to repair the soft furnishings and draperies, and make the old couple as warm and comfortable as possible in this draughty barn. She suggested they decamp into the sunny morning room, which could be freshened up and well heated. Here they could sit with their papers. A writing bureau was moved from their correspondence, and sometimes meals were taken in the old kitchen, so there was constant warmth and less upheaval. Now that Christmas was coming round again, and all the family were returning for the holidays, Min took delight in preparing the drawing room, dining room and bedrooms for the coming celebrations, and there was always somewhere safe for young Anna to toddle. For her sake alone, she had placed her wedding portrait prominently in the little sitting room so that no tongues would crack about whether she was one of the many dubious widows with posthumous children. Here she was Mrs. Broddick, Mrs. Mary Broddick. This fresh start was honoured with her best name. As Min went about her Christmas preparations one winter morning, she stamped her feet in the snow, sniffing the air with a strange excitement. There were trees and hills all around Pitlandry. Afternoons off were spent wandering through the parkland, with Anna in the pram trying to identify an oak from an ash, a rowan from a beech, kicking the leaves into crunchy piles. There were no howling gales and salt spray to stunt the growth of a forest. Shrubs were sturdy and full of berries. It was the lushness of this border country that stunned her senses. Pitlandry was like living in a woodland paradise, with no sea lapping at the door whispering, reminding her of their treachery. Not that paradise did not have its own noisy side. Min smiled, staring into the old stables, which were piled high with boxes, wheels and spare parts for motor engines. Strange vehicles came and went in the night, leaving drifts of weird tarpaulin shapes by the stable door. She never knew what might be parked up each morning outside her cottage door, but one thing was for certain. Captain Henry Lennox and his band of merry men would trough the last of the bacon rations at the kitchen table. The captain appeared one morning in the October after her arrival, blocking her in. "Do you mind not parking that crane outside my door? I can't get out," she yelled out of the bedroom window, forgetting that the neat plaits she coiled round her head were dangling down like schoolgirls' braids. "How am I expected to get a pram under that?" She was addressing a tweed cap, thinking it was workman. The cap was raised and a pair of eyes appraised the vision in the window, from under bushy eyebrows the colour of a foxtail. That was when she recognised him from the photograph on the mantelpiece, which had the pride of place above all others. "Sorry, you must be the new housekeeper. Didn't Pa explain? I run my business from the back of the house." He raised his eyebrow in a question. Min flushed with embarrassment, but he just laughed and waved. "Give me 2 shakes and it'll be shifted." Captain Harry came and went like the tide. A week would go by and then a convoy of assorted vehicles would trundle up the rutted back lane, scattering mud in all directions. Sometimes the whole driveway to the main entrance was littered with army surplus equipment, and the lanes outside Pitlandry would be lined with vans and lorries with strange number plates. Men in brown felt trilby hats would exchange wads of banknotes as if in some horse-dealing auction. Colonel Hubert explained that his son was running a haulage business, transporting goods and ex-army supplies now redundant because of the demobilisation of troops. Min wondered why he chose such an out-of-the-way base when it would be easier to find central premises in the nearby towns closer to the main routes south out of Scotland. Occasionally, he stayed overnight, but mostly he came and went in one day. "Now you see me, now you don't," he would wink and raise his cap. He certainly brightened up his parents by his visits, never arriving at the house empty-handed. Sometimes there were chocolates with foreign labels, or a box of stockings for his mother, which she pushed aside. "What do I want with these at my age? Here, Mistress Broddick, you share them with Cook. They'll look better on your slender legs. When my son comes bearing gifts, I start to worry. What's he up to now, Hubert?" The Colonel was deaf and smiled benignly. Min was grateful for such bounty, keeping the stockings safe in a glass jam jar. Harry was the Benjamin of the family. Born when his mother was on the turn, Cook whispered. He was a beloved, indulged only son, for his elder brother, Roderick, had fallen in the Great War. His handsome face peered from behind an ornate silver frame on the grand piano. Daisy, their daughter, was married and had a line of daughters with her on the piano. The portraits were colour-tinted, and each child and grandchild shared that same sandy gold hair. Harry was the joy of their old age, and Min sensed the warmth and affection between them all. How different from the stiffness between her meagre family. A child should know it is loved, she sighed, and I never was. But Anna must have love in abundance. A mother, a father, and a child. That was what she wished for Anna. But Ewan was still abroad, unable to give them the security that clung like ivy to the walls of Pitlandry House. His letters were often delayed and forwarded from Fetri. They were few and far between these days. Anna's first birthday had long passed, and Min still withheld knowledge of her child. She feared she was leaving it too long, but what could she do? Sometimes when she heard car wheels in the night, and the torches flashed under her window, Min worried just what caper the captain was really up to. Sometimes he disappeared for weeks, and the house settled down to its old routine until the vehicles lumbered down the lane, roaring their arrival again. Harry was a born tease. He took delight in teasing her about her accent. Where's the Highland lilt? Where's the whiff of the Dark Isles? You could give Princess Elizabeth lessons. He picked up her child with enthusiasm. Little Anna gets more stunning by the day. A real Shirley Temple. Now her hair is black as a raven's wing, and you with hair of flax. Such a mysterious combination, Mrs. Broddick. He did not question her background, and she was grateful. Min tried to stay unruffled, and did not rise to his baiting, but she was unused to such teasing, and didn't know how to react. One afternoon he returned from the town with a handmade wooden trike, with 3 sturdy wheels that Anna could trundle across the cobbled yard and pretend to ride. From that moment, he was hers, and she ran to him, the minx, like a puppy waiting for a dog biscuit, tugging at his pockets. It was the oldest trick in the book, to get the woman through the bairn. Min stepped back on guard from this charming young employer. All her mother's dire warnings were ringing in her ears. He was not particularly good-looking, rugged, foxy with bright blue eyes and creases on his cheeks from grinning a lot. He wore tweeds and outrageous shirts, gaudy ties that didn't quite match. There was no mistaking his accent, his breeding, his affluent, generous manner, and she was suspicious of his obvious charm. Men like him could take this Pitlandry paradise for granted. The land, the house, the elegant surroundings, driving an open-topped sports car with a foreign name. He was everything Ewan was not, worldly with a shrewd business sense, more English than Scottish, and no sailor. Yet, she sensed he was fishing for a response from her, flirting with an ease that unsettled her. This was new territory, and she was afraid. All the troubles in her life came from the men around her. A storm of rekindled passion for Ewan had thrown her marriage off course, and nothing would be in its expected place ever again. It was safer to be wary and polite, until Harry laughed and called her Mrs. D'Anvers, a jibe that meant nothing to her until she took Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca off the shelf. Anna had no such qualms about the man who bounced her on his knee and brought her pop-up picture books and sang nursery rhymes to her delight. Min felt so guilty that this might be Ewan's privilege, not Harry Lennox's role. She was robbing him of the pleasure of knowing all about her antics. Then, out of the blue, Ewan wrote saying he was soon to be demobbed and wanted to study art in London, of all places. He wrote to say he had won a travel scholarship and would she go abroad with him. Min panicked that he might call on them unexpectedly. He was from the past, with all its secrets. She wanted no reminder of her perfidy, however much Ewan was a part of her heart. How could she contemplate dragging a child round war-torn Europe? A child he didn't even know existed. Min agonised whether to reply. Perhaps he was trying to forget the past as much as she was. Going abroad was his way of dealing with it all. How could he now afford to support a woman and child? Was the strain of this enforced separation beginning to tell on him too? They were out of touch with each other. Better to let things slide for a while longer, she reasoned, long into the night. How she longed to feel his arms around her again, to be loved and warmed by his body. But here in Pitlandry House, she felt safe from the pressure to face the future. Here she spoke only her refined English, like a foreign language. Here there was beauty and security, and no one was interested in her history. Harry Lennox was another matter. What was he up to? Was he amassing a fortune on the black market? If so, good luck to him, she mused. He was taking his chance, as she was taking hers. Is this why he had dumped his parents in this country hidey-hole? Was some of the stuff on secret display not exactly surplus to army requirements, but gently removed from the stockpiles by stealth? What the eye does not see, the heart does not miss. Was that how she was treating Ewan? Lately she kept watching her daughter, her fierce, stubborn tantrums, the way her hair curled tightly, and those dark eyes. Whose eyes were those? Was it possible, after all, that she was Ewan's child? How could she deny him knowledge of her? Min shuddered at the thought of all her deception, and wrote a Christmas letter at once to Ewan, begging him to come up north for Hogmanay before he made any further decisions. There was so much she needed to explain to him in person. For once, she let Harry drive her into Pitlandry Village for the bus to Peebles, where she could buy a few small gifts for Christmas. Knowing Ewan would be arriving soon kept all her nagging doubts at bay. This deception had gone on too long. It was ridiculous not to share her news with him. Christmas celebrations were still something new for Min, so different from their puritanical Highland celebrations. On Fettrie, there had been no Christmas, only a New Year ceilidh and some black bun. There was never any money for lavish presents and fancy food. She hardly knew how to make lavish preparations that first winter, and had to ask cook what was the done thing in the household. It was Edie Laurie, the cleaner, who came to her rescue, telling her which greenery to bring in and hang up, where all the Christmas decorations were packed away. There was to be a party for Daisy's children, and someone would dress up as Father Christmas on Christmas Eve. Soon Daisy Lennox would be arriving with her girls from London. Gil Chisholm, the gardener, brought in a large spruce in a barrel for the Christmas tree, and it started to snow again. Harry arrived bearing boxes of candles and wine and dried fruit, dates and walnuts, tiny oranges and a fruit called a banana, not seen since before the war. No one asked how he had acquired such luxuries. It was Christmas after all, and Christmas was the time for indulgence, Min was learning. Anna reached out to grab the candles from the tree, her eyes sparkling in wonder at the lights and tinsel. Min had never seen anything so beautiful. There were even presents under the tree for Anna and Min. A pretty dolly with a porcelain face and a cashmere scarf for the housekeeper. It was like watching one of those wonderful Hollywood film scenes coming to life before her eyes, with log fires and tinsel clinking crystal and the exotic, spicy smells of the season. Nothing had prepared Min for the pleasure of it all. Daisy's girls, Bella and Poppy, latched onto Anna as if she was their own toy doll. They fought over who was to push her along the paths and play with her until she was thoroughly spoilt and fractious. Min wrote to her mother with all their news and promised to visit in the summer, when the seas were not rough. On Boxing Day, she was even invited to the family charades party and stood back discreetly while everyone made complete fools of themselves, drinking wine until they were quite silly. When it came to the clearing up, everyone suddenly disappeared, leaving Min to sort out the debris with Harry hovering behind her back, the scent of his cigar wafting around the room. Black becomes you, Mrs. Broddick, although it's a pity you have to wear it so often. I should love to see you in a midnight blue satin and silver. I know someone in the trade who could kit you out perfectly. Mr. Lennox, please. I'm the housekeeper, not some fly-by-night. What would I be doing with midnight satin? Her words shot out like a bullet from a gun. I'm sorry, I've touched a nerve. Just because we employ you doesn't mean I can't make a suggestion, does it? He said. It depends what sort of suggestion, Mr. Lennox. I find that work and personal comments don't mix in my experience. I can finish all this myself, if you don't mind. Min replied with a frostiness intended to warn him off, but he didn't budge. Harry stood by the fireplace, puffing his cigar, his foot on the fender rail observing her busyness. I've been watching you. You're just too perfect, too correct. You never let your guard down. If I didn't know your references were impeccable, I'd say you had something to hide. Oh, please. Min bent her head to hide her red cheeks. No, hear me out, Mrs. Broddick. It takes one to know one. I like the way you keep your own counsel so discreetly. You see, in business, you sometimes need a partner who knows when to speak and when to be silent. Your daughter does you credit. It must be hard bringing her up alone. I can see you're ambitious for her. If you and I were partners, in the strictest sense, of course, she would want for nothing. Ponies, clothes, the right connections. He smiled, looking pleased with himself. Min put the tray of glasses down with a clatter to steady herself. Why are you saying all this to me? What can you possibly want with a domestic except the oldest promise in the book? I may be an islander straight off the boat, but I've seen enough in life there to know what's what. Steady, old girl. Nothing like that, I promise you, but I do need a partner to take around to certain occasions. A bit of a decoy, decorative and discreet, who can help with my work, entertaining clients, putting them at ease. Harry was watching her reaction. Min looked him straight in the eye. Do you mean as a spy? What are you up to on the black market? Is it something not exactly legitimate? Nothing terribly dodgy. Let's just say a few shades of grey. A few deals here and there that need a careful, delicate touch. A few palms greased along the way. Somebody wants a favour and I oblige with no middlemen to rake off half the profit. All strictly legit, but on the QT. Harry pointed to his nose with a smirk. I'm not sure what you're getting at, she replied. I don't want to hurt my employers. They've been good to me and I like this position. Who do you think picked you up from the pile? Who do you think pays for all this? Heating, rent, transport? Did you think it was done in my father's war pension? Come on, Brodie. I chose the house and I want my parents to have every comfort. Do you think I'd risk their reputation? There's so much business out there for the taking, but it all takes time. And delicate negotiations at dinners and soirees. All I'm asking of you is to dress up and be my guest. No strings, I promise. I gather there's some Highland laddie waiting in the wings. Min smiled with relief. Yes, there is. Someone I knew on Fetri. We were engaged once before the war. He'll be coming up for Hogmanay, If I do help you, it will be only for a short time. I'm not in the market for any other arrangement." "No, of course not. I wouldn't dream of suggesting such an outrageous arrangement. Strictly business. What could be better, Mistress Brodie?" He smirked. "Mrs. Broddick, please, in working hours. Give me your measurements and I'll see to the midnight satin." Harry continued to press his request, unabashed. Min shook her head. "Thank you. I'll see to my own wardrobe if you can find the coupons and the cash." If this was going to be the arrangement, the sooner Ewan was in the picture, the better. The snow fell gently at first like plump feathers, blanketing out the gardens and the paths. But Ewan did not arrive. She had arranged digs for him in the village in Edie Laurie's box bed. Min waited for the post, but there was no reply. She had found out all the connecting train timetables from the south just in case he needed transport. She waited first with impatience, and then with desperation. Hogmanay came and went, and still there was no word from him. How could he not come when she'd called? Why had he not answered her letter? She wrote again in fury, and her letter bounced back unopened and readdressed, not known at this address. She wrote to her mother to see if he had written there, but there was no reply. The snow kept falling steadily, blocking the roads and the rail tracks, and cutting off Pitlandry House from its village and suppliers. Now came the battle to survive against ice and snow on a scale not seen in the district for 100 years. There was no time to mourn Ewan's desertion when there was a household to feed and keep warm. The drive was blocked, and they shovelled a rough pathway until Harry's equipment supply came in the nick of time, with a metal snowplough attached that could be stuck to the old tractor. Every day, Min drove it up and down from the cottage, through the courtyard, to the back of the house to clear a path to the fuel store and the coal house, and watched with despair as their food supplies began to dwindle. On bad days, no supplies reached the house, and Min was forced to scour the larders and pantries for something to make warming broths and stews. All Mistress Lamont's strict training came back into use as she gutted frozen poultry, pheasants and rabbits for the pot. Mrs. Lennox caught a chest cold and had to be laid abed downstairs by the fire. The doctor came out with snowshoes on his feet. Harry fought his way through the blizzards to relieve the siege with fresh supplies in an army jeep towing a trailer. Anna danced through the tunnels of snow to greet him and flung herself into his arms, fishing in his pockets for a lollipop. "Sweetie Dada!" Min blushed at the child's words. "Oh, Ewan, where are you? What have I done? Have I left it too late? All those months I ignored your letters. Are you punishing me now? Have you given up on our passion? Given up on our promises? Why shouldn't you forget me when it's all of my own doing?" Anna was growing too fond of Harry, and Min was wary of letting him too close to her. As the weeks expanded into months and years, Ewan's image was fading like a photo in the sun, blurring into a shadowy outline, and sometimes she could no longer hear the sound of his deep voice booming in her head. Harry's presence now disturbed the calm of the retreat. He was always there, waiting patiently in the wings, ready to pounce. "Oh, Ewan, come back soon." Chapter 2. April 1947. In the spring of 1947, Ewan McKinnon returned to London. He had not meant to stay in France for so long, but when his bursary ran out, he took himself down to the vineyards to help with the grape harvest. He had drifted through the autumn and terrible winter of early 47, visiting all those who had helped him evade capture in 43. Now, as a free man, he visited the forest haunts, paying homage to old friends in the Maquis who had been captured, tortured, or shot, calling on those families who had risked their lives in making sure that he survived. Wherever he went, he was pressed to dine and stay to talk over old times. That first day in France had altered the direction of his own career away from destroying bridges, rail tracks, gun turrets, and killing men and towards creating pictures. He toured old haunts, sketching the broken fragments of warfare, bullet-strafed houses, execution posts, bloodstains and bomb sites, capturing the sorrow and the pity of war with his paintbrush. Now that the truth of the real resistance had come out from the shadows, he was able to verify and honour those brave souls mistaken for collaborators in the heady days after June 44. That first return to Fétry had been overshadowed by news of Min's marriage and the tragic events that followed their lovemaking. He'd vowed to stay away from the island for her sake to protect her from gossip and calumny. Once his commission was finished, his tour of duty over, he attempted to settle down into a training course. But formal teaching did not sit easily on this ex-commando, nor did the constraints of civilian life. It was not the way he wanted to learn his craft. In truth, he no longer knew exactly what he wanted to do. Only the thought of Min eventually by his side kept him plodding at his formal studies, but she was proving elusive and difficult to contact. Why did she not write regularly or come to visit him? He was glad that she had broken free from the confines of Fétry for a temporary position in the Scottish borders. Yet, why was she so vague about her exact location and seemingly disinterested in the news that he had been awarded a minor bursary to help with tuition and the rent of a Paris studio? Did she no longer care about the reunion? Nothing was turning out how he had hoped. The chance to study abroad seemed the only answer to his restlessness and disappointment. His mother had died while he was abroad, and his father was now settled in a parish close to Inverness. There were few ties left on Fétry, just the occasional cheery letter from his old school chum Joanna McCallum, who was teaching in Glasgow. Joanna knew nothing of Min's departure and seemed surprised that his old sweetheart had left the island. Ewan wrote one last letter to her last address, telling Min of his decision to go abroad and suggesting that she might like to join him. No one would care if they were lovers. Why did she not reply? He waited and waited, and then left for France without a backward glance. Two could play at that game, and he was far too wary to query her silence. Only when he returned to his London digs the following spring to collect his battered trunk from a student friend was he given a pile of mislead letters. Among them was Min's desperate letter written in Christmas 1946, begging him to come north for Hogmanay to Peebles by train. His first instinct was to find a call box and make a trunk call, but for the life of him he didn't know the name of her employers. He sent a telegram to the post office at Pitlandry to be forwarded to Mrs. Broddick, housekeeper at the big house, saying he was on his way. He bought a ticket at King's Cross Station and sat on the platform, dreaming of this long overdue reunion. Now there would be no one to hinder them being together. Months of travelling had hardened his features, coarsened his skin, fleshed out his lean frame. Living on cheese and wine and good bread once more suited him. Only his clothes were worn to tatters, his corduroys baggy and smooth in the seat, his tweed jacket patched at the elbow, and his thick beard made him look like a tramp. As he peered excitedly out of the sooty window as the train rattled up the east coast towards the borders, he knew Min would accept him just as he was. He could not wait to see her face when he turned up on her doorstep with open arms and a knapsack full of drawings and a bottle of lovely perfume. The years in between would seem as minutes once they were together. How could they have stayed away from each other so long? It was Ken Broddick's accident that had forced this separation. For all he'd fought in dirty skirmishes on lightning raids, killing soldiers, traitors, the shoving of her husband's body off the rock to the mercy of the sea, was something he could not forget, or forgive. They should have told the island constable, and be damned. It was all his fault, and the silence had gone on too long. This troubled his conscience. Was this why neither of them was able to refer to that last meeting? Was it guilt driving this wedge between them, tearing them apart? They had punished themselves with silence for too long. He was looking out over the grey North Sea coast with interest. It was no surprise that most of his artwork was haunted by the sea, that the upsweep of the waves, the swollen waters of Fetri, found its way time and time again onto his canvas. The sea was his constant inspiration and his curse. He drew upon boyhood memories of canoeing along the coast. The rocky outcrop where Agnes had died was imprinted on his mind's eye. All the momentous events in his life had taken place close to the shore. From memory, he could picture the changing colours of his own familiar seascape. One day, he knew he would have to go back and face those distant shores. But not now. Now he was in the lush green borderlands of Scotland, within sight of Drumlin Hills, cavernous gullies where the Tweed rolled down amongst the pines and firs, and grazing sheep and cattle fed on green pastures. It was an alien landscape to an islander used to flatness, white sands and a stretch of ocean. As he sat on the country bus, twisting and turning on his way to Pitlandry, he thought only of Min's welcoming arms and the sight of her silvery mermaid hair. Now they could be together. The driver dropped him off by the iron gate posts. He saw before him a long drive, sloping down towards the river, lined by huge black poplar trees. Ewan strolled slowly down the lane, sniffing the blossom, savouring the sight of the stone house nestling in the hollow, the roof of its one turret glinting in the sunshine. It was a scene straight out of a John Buchan novel, a hunting tower, perhaps, but he was no Richard Hannay in his shabby tweeds and knapsack on his shoulder. No dogs barked at his arrival, so he made for the tradesman entrance, knowing his place in such an establishment. The courtyard was full of motorbike parts, and a man was tinkering with the engine of a Lagonda sports car. He looked up with a smile. "Sorry, old chap, cook's day off? No scraps today?" Ewan nodded, realising that the chauffeur thought him some tramp on the scrounge. "I'm Ewan McKinnon, a friend of Mrs. Broddick. She'll be expecting me." "Are you now?" replied the chauffeur, looking at him more carefully. "Ah, the Highland laddie, could it be? The Wanderer returns. I think she was expecting you last Hogmanay." "I didn't get her letter," he explained. "I've been studying abroad. I've only just got back. Is she inside?" Ewan found the man's attitude vaguely patronising and made for the door. "Sorry, no can do. You're too late. She left for Edinburgh this morning on business. She was not expecting visitors. But I sent a telegram. Ewan looked crestfallen at the news. I'll find somewhere to stay for the night until she returns. I'm in no rush, he insisted. Having come so far, he was not to be fashed by a delay of a few hours. So it seems. Pity. I think you've missed the boat, the bus and the train there, old boy. The Lennox family think the world of Brodie, you know, said the mechanic as he continued polishing the bonnet. Ewan assumed he was talking to the chauffeur and didn't want to know his opinion of Min. He was a bit too smooth and sure of himself, that one. He turned to the line of motorbikes. These are old army bikes. You were in the army? The young man wiped his greasy fingers on a rag. Tank corps, actually. But these are all surplus. Do you want to buy one? I can do you a deal. Mr. Lennox can supply anything for the right price. I bet he can, Ewan sniffed, sensing some scam going on. You work for the Lennox family, then? You could say that, the man replied, eyeing up the suitor with suspicion. What outfit were you in? Navy. Special boat squadron. Hush, hush, chappie, nice work. A frogman? Not exactly, Ewan shook his head, having no desire to pursue this conversation. His service record was not for general knowledge. He turned to walk back up the lane. I'll call back later, he shouted. The man was following after him, scratching his head. Look, I don't know if I ought to be telling you this, but Brodie, Mrs. Broddick's away to buy some fancy rig-out for a special occasion, so we've gathered. She and young Mr. Lennox are very pally. Now, he's a grand chap, heir to all of this. Mr. Roddy was a pilot, one of the few, quite the ace. He's got a DFC in Bar. They're very close. Just thought I'd better warn you, old chap. The war's over and new beginnings all round, I say. Shame to disturb her and the kiddie too. Such a bonny bairn, bright as a button. She'll be getting a good education if the Lennoxes have anything to do with it. The chauffeur winked. I didn't know she had a child. Ewan's heart started at this news. Harry tapped his nose. One of those post-war-time things. Don't ask me the details, but let's just say the master adores the tiny mite. Shall I be telling her where you're staying? Ewan was too stunned to take in all the chauffeur was hinting. No, perhaps not. She's probably forgotten all about me. A lot of water under the bridge and all that. You're sure she's happy with him? Delirious old chap. She's a born lady. Fits in beautifully. The family thinks she's quite one of them. But I can tell her you called. No, not if it upsets everything. She deserves some peace. Her first husband made her unhappy. I just hoped when things settled down we could get back together again. We were sort of engaged for a while, you see. Thanks for being so honest with me. Perhaps it's better to let sleeping dogs lie. My timing doesn't seem to be very good in these matters. Better to leave things well alone this time. How could he forget his arrival on the ferry boat in Fetri and the mayhem he had stirred up there? There could be no second mishap. Was it nearly 3 years ago? I'm sure young Mr. Lennox will be giving her everything she wants. Only the best in this household, the chauffeur smiled, looking him up and down with undisguised superiority. That doesn't always make a body happy though, does it? Ewan argued, staring hard at the mechanic with the plush accent and silk scarf tied round his neck. Oh, come on now, Mr. McKinnon. Ladies like the good things of life, and Brodie seems no different from the rest. I suppose so. Stupid of me to think she wouldn't run with the herd. I'll be taking my leave of you. Ewan reached out to shake his hand firmly. Yes, of course, you do that, sir. Pleased to meet you, Mr. McKinnon. And you are? He asked. Just call me Harry. I'll show you to the gate. No, wait, fancy a spin in the jalopy? I'll run you to the station. It'll be a long journey home for you otherwise. Thanks, Harry, that's most obliging of you. No trouble at all. A friend of Brodie's is a friend of mine. Fine lassie, a real lady. She'll make Lennox a very happy man. Ewan clung onto his seat, trying to clear his head as the wind whistled and the sports car roared and spluttered round the twisty lanes towards Peebles. So that was why she had not written. Too much had happened since their last meeting. Now she was a mother and soon to be a bride. There was a baby and a new life to plan. Is that why she was desperate for him to come? So she could explain it all face to face and introduce her Mr. Roddy, the Air Force ace. You didn't waste much time, did you? His heart cried out in anger. Every time I leave you, you find comfort elsewhere. Frailty. Thy name is woman. Old Shakespeare was right. He was rattled and shaken by the chauffeur's wild driving to the station, but a lift was better than Shank's pony. There was no point in staying or going back to London now. It would be easier to head north to Glasgow. He might even look up Joanna McCallum and catch up on old times before he went on to Inverness to see his father. He had her address somewhere in his rucksack. Somehow he didn't want to be alone with this disappointment. He needed to talk it all out with an old friend, and Joe McCallum was a good egg. His mind was racing. It had happened again. Him hanging back, sure of her loyalty and love, but staying away too long, just as before. How could one compete with a Battle of Britain ace who lived in a woodland palace, offering security and a home for his bride and their love child? All he had brought north in his knapsack was a battered sketch pad and the promise of foreign travel. Not much to satisfy the obvious ambitions of Minnie McPhee, he sighed with bitterness. Perhaps it was time to find someone else who would be impressed by his world and show his faithless lover two could play at that game. Let me see you in the train, Mr. McKinnon. Harry, the chauffeur, lifted out the kit bag with a smile. There's no need, I can manage, said Ewan, surprised at such willing service. Anything to oblige the SBS? Harry made a mock salute to his passenger as Ewan made for the platform. The driver waved and smiled, emptying his pockets, throwing an undelivered telegram into the waste bin with relief. It was a glorious evening as the bus cornered the lanes tightly, brushing against the leaves of overhanging trees. Min looked up at the flashes of spring greens and the blossom dripping from the boughs like welcoming garlands. She would never tire of this journey from the bustling city out into the winding, rolling lanes along the River Tweed, which flashed and danced in the late afternoon sunlight. She had sat down wearily after a successful shopping trip to Edinburgh, with a box containing a ball gown of midnight blue velvet, studded with silver sequins. It had been fun trying on all the gowns in the wholesale warehouses that Harry Lennox had managed to get her passes to view, but to watch the beautiful panorama unfolding before her with her daughter sleeping on her knee was a luxury no money could buy. It had been a lovely excursion. Harry was waiting for her at the halt, looking especially pleased with himself. Come and see my new sports car, he said, ushering her into the passenger seat to view his Lagonda, carrying her sleeping child into the car. Do you like it? Not another change of car. You never keep them 5 minutes. But it's very swish, she smiled indulgently. Harry and his sports cars were a family joke. Anna was ready for her cot. Harry followed them both into the cottage, eyeing her box. So you made a purchase. Good show. Can I come in? You will try it for me. I want to see you in all your finery. When I've put Anna to bed, she replied wearily, for it had been a tiring day spending his money. Why don't you call her Nancy? He said. She's my child. I like Anna, she replied. But Nancy suits her better. Nancy Lennox, how does that sound? Min looked up at him, shocked by his presumption. Don't be silly, Harry. She's a Brodick. Is she? If you married me, she could be a Lennox, he whispered, staring at her. Are you drunk? Why should I marry you? She said, shaking her head. No, I'm not drunk. Never more sober. Marry me and I'll give little Nancy the whole world as a plaything. She'll have only the best, and a mother too. Fine clothes, horses, and a respectable name, he said, grabbing her hand and kneeling on the floor. You are drunk. Get up. I told you I'm not free to marry anyone. My husband may be dead, but in the eyes of the law, he's still missing. I'm not free to marry anyone yet, and if I were, there's someone else. What had brought this on? You can forget about him. I know he never bothers to answer your letters or contact you. What sort of relationship is that? Harry knew how to press home a valid but painful point. He must be abroad still, she argued. I don't know. My private life is none of your business. How dare he question why Ewan had stopped writing to her? Anyone could see she was still rankled by the long distance between them. Oh, but it is, young lady. Ever since I saw you hanging out that window with those golden pigtails, I knew I was never going to let you out of my life. Ever. Even if it does take years. You're the one I want, and what I want I usually get. Harry was smiling wickedly, raising his brows in a challenge. I was taught want never gets. I'm not one of your black market falling off the lorry bits up for sale to the highest bidder, she snapped. You'll never get a better offer than this. I can give you comfort and luxuries. Think about it for Anna's sake. I'll be patient. I'll stay on my bended knee all night if I have to. But I'll not be thwarted by you or anyone. Go and change into your glad rags and let me see what wondrous goods I'm buying. Harry wafted her into the bedroom. There was such a glint of lust and ambition in his foxy eye as he appraised her body, her posture and the flush of her cheeks. Her fingers trembled as she unfastened her plain clothes and fingered the exquisite fabric of the dress, looking at herself in the mirror. Why was he being so attentive? She could hear him singing a nursery rhyme to Anna. Perhaps she owed her daughter a secure future. What if Ewan never came to call? What if he didn't acknowledge the girl as his? What if she wasn't his baby? She made a grand entrance out of her little bedroom, shaking with the chill and a frisson of fear. Harry's eyes lit up. You pay for dressing, Brodie. I know we have a business partnership, but it'll work even better if you do me the honour of marrying me. You always make me so proud when I take you to meet clients. But I want more from you. I want to see passion in those icy blue eyes. I want everyone in the room to see what a beautiful woman is on my arm. You've tantalised me long enough. I don't care a jot if your hubby's alive or dead. Marriage lines are only bits of paper. Who cares if we jump the gun? We can go abroad. No one will know. You and I are going places, my darling. Pitlandry House will soon have served its purposes, and I'll take us south to England, the continent, wherever. What do you say? He whispered, his eyes sparkling in the firelight. This is only the beginning, Brodie. Only the beginning of a wonderful life. Come here and let me kiss away your fears. I'm going to make you so happy. Harry was drawing her ever closer into his perfumed net, reeling her like a fish on a hook into his arms with promises. Promises. She looked around her shabby little room with its pitiful furniture and homespun furnishings. Do you want this for the rest of your life? Do you want Anna to miss out on everything a gentleman's daughter might expect from an indulgent father? Across the yard in the big house, there were acres of space to furnish and all that her heart desired. She looked up at the little figurine shining on the mantelpiece. It stood so forlorn, showing up all the rest of the room with its delicacy. If you say yes to Harry, who knows how many pieces of china you can add to your collection, she thought. As Harry crushed her in his arms, she cried not with joy, but with anger for Ewan. Where are you? Why have you not returned for me? There was no warmth in her lips as she kissed Harry slowly, but he opened her mouth gently at first, pressing expertly enough to arouse a flicker of a response. His eyes glinted brightly, and she knew he was buying her compliance with promises of comfort and security. The part of her that still yearned for Ewan wanted to draw back from this contract, But there was a needier part of her that snatched at this unexpected offer, knowing she was getting a bargain. Harry Lennox was taking her to his bed just as she was, flawed, with a child, from an unpromising background, and asking no questions. He wanted her youthful body, her passion and commitment in return for his protection. Was it wrong to want calmer waters after all the storms of the past years? Here she could be safe among strangers. Here Anna was already happy. Only a fool would turn this offer down. But what if Ewan ever came to collect her? There was no use depending on other people's promises, she sighed. You have to ride the wave. A daughter of the tide must take the tide when it comes, and the tide was turning in her favour for once. You don't love him, cried her heart. But this time she must let common sense be her guide. Harry was offering respectability at long last. A good name, a chance to do good in a district and to give Anna the best chances. He was offering her the Cranach, and all those childhood dreams on a china plate. Only a fool would refuse him. This time, she was deciding for herself. So what if some of the friends and acquaintances he encouraged her to entertain were a bit shady, shallow, glittery, constantly on the search for the latest distraction money could buy? Would they ignore her obvious humble background once they were married? Did they even care? Are you marrying Harry for his money? Selling yourself down the river for a cabinet of porcelain, a wardrobe of furs and satins, or to protect Anna? How will I know? She thought. And does it matter? Chapter 3. Fetri, 1948. In the summer of 1948, Ailey McPhee made her summer progress from Fetri via Glasgow to visit Niall and his wife, Mima, in Rutherglen, then on to the Pitlandry House, where she sat bemused in the kitchen gardens, admiring the rows of vegetables as Gil Chisholm hoed the weeds down neat rows. The annual holiday visit had always strained, this time not least because Min was in early pregnancy with her second child and felt wretched and tired, and Ailey was full of news from the island. It was such a swish wedding. Factor McCallum's daughter and Ewan Dhu, the minister's son. They went to France on their honeymoon, and now he's back painting pictures at the Cranach, a gay, funny way to earn a living. Mother paused, seeing the look of surprise flit across Min's face. Ewan's mother would turn in her grave to see him dressed like a tramp, and know some minister of the kirk with a dog collar around his neck. Still, you've done better for yourself with Harry. A rising tide lifts all boats, they say. I always hoped you'd make a go of it with the minister's son. But who knows what the Lord has in store for us? Min watched her own mother treating Harry and Anna as if they were minor royalty. Her English was halting and hesitant, and the little girl hung back from her stern face, steel grey hair and plain clothes. When Harry's friends called by, they assumed she was Min's old nanny, and no one told them otherwise. But Min was not proud of this deception. It was when Mother sat in the sunlight, sucking peppermints, that Min noticed how translucent and yellowish was the skin on her face, and her plump legs were now like candlesticks. So thin she had become. Go and see Dr. Murray, she suggested. Mother shook her head firmly, saying, I'm fine enough. I can wait. This inland air is too dry for my taste. I miss the tang of salted ling in the wind. My stomach is not used to such fancy foods. The richness of it sticks in my craw. It's time to be away home, Magoy. There was a faraway gaze in her dull eyes, like a dog pining for its own kennel. When the telegram arrived later in the autumn addressed to Mrs. Lennox at Pitlandry House, asking Min to ring Dr. Murray on Fetri urgently, It was not entirely unexpected. "I think you'd better be paying her a call, Mary," said the doctor. "She's no long for this world. The sickness can no longer be contained. She's asking for you to come back home one last time." Should I take Anna from nursery school? Min wondered. But the prospect of them squashed into the stone cottage, facing a dying old lady, was unthinkable. She must face this journey alone. Harry would see to her with Edie Laurie's help. They were settled at Pitlandry now, and the house was being gradually renovated to fit their growing family. Her child needed familiar surroundings when there was sadness in the house. Min was 4 months pregnant by now, still feeling sick and queasy at the thought of a sea voyage, but once summoned, she made every effort to catch the next flight from Abbotssinch Airport near Glasgow, and Harry drove her to the airport in his latest Bentley. She looked down at her wedding ring of white gold, studded with diamonds. They had married abroad discreetly in the autumn of 1947, and Edie Laurie, who'd married Gil Chisholm, came to live in the cottage in Min's place. Her life was now running a large household. Mother's death would be the last chapter of her old life on Fetri. "I can come with you," offered Harry, anxious for the health of his coming child. "We can transfer her to a private hospital in Peebles if you wish." "No, she would hate being among strangers. Better to go alone, I think. I don't know how long all this will take. I want you to be around for Anna. And see to all the alterations in the kitchen," she said, looking round proudly at her new modern kitchen, with tiled walls and the latest kitchen range. "I want everything shipshape for Christmas when Daisy comes. Make sure that the decorators finish on time. It sounds as if this is going to be my very last visit to Fetri." As the plane bumped in the clouds on this sad journey north, she could feel the old pull of the Isles returning. She had not regretted her decision to live with Harry. Anna must have a father, someone to provide for her and cushion her from the harshness of life. No one had ever provided for Min, only a grumpy parent and an absent uncle. Her own children would have a better life. She smiled, thinking of Harry's persistence in wooing her. He made her laugh, distracted her from her bouts of doubt and gloom. There was none of the old fear in making love with Harry either. He was experienced with women, and it showed. He knew how to climb the ladder of success. In uniform and a kilt, he was passable. Most of all, he belonged to the world she had always aspired to. All her life, she had been preparing for this role, even at the Cranach, she mused. Dressing well came easily, for she had an innate sense of style and an eye for colour. She looked elegant in the new Dior fashions, with their full skirts and nipped-in waists. Speaking with her careful cut-glass accent gave her a cachet among the border country set, who were intrigued about her mysterious background, but assumed she was one of them from her accent and elegant clothes. She had started off simply as Harry's escort, his consort, and gradually become Brodie Lennox, his queen, his equal. Any black market dealings were abandoned in favour of more respectable business acquisitions now. Harry sniffed out companies to be bought and sold on, developed transport and haulage links with the continent. Harry had the knack of finding the right man for the job and placing him in authority, giving himself time and freedom to mix in the county, in the hunting, shooting and fishing fraternity, who had contacts in London and within the right circles around Edinburgh. Once she was his wife, she was invited to join the exclusive charity committees and the coffee morning circuit, where she too could glean information to further their cause. Together they were a team, and Harry adored his little girl. In the early days, she covered for him willingly, lied to keep his standing afloat, pretended and disguised their rickety finances when deals went wrong side up, flirted with disgusting men to keep them sweet. It had not been easy, but Harry had delivered all his promises to her. He was a safe option and a sure bet. He would never let her down. The fact that she had never really trusted him was always pushed to the back of her mind. When his parents died within months of each other, there was no reason to stay on at Putlandry, but neither of them could bear to move south. Sometimes she dreamt of Ewan and the gale of passion he could stir up within her. News of his wedding had only convinced her how right she had been to choose Harry, but she envied Joanna McCallum. The ring he had given her was confined to the back of her dressing table drawer, in its maroon battered box. She could not bear to look at it. Anna would have it one day for her birthday. In her eyes, he had proved as unreliable as Ken Broddick. The fact that Ewan and Jo were staying on Fetri now terrified her more than facing her mother's death. Mother was lying in the box bed by the fire, with kind neighbours keeping the peat fire banked up and steaming pans of broth on her new stove, but she was too sick now to eat much. It was time for Min to roll up her sleeves and cede to her comforts to make their last days of her life more bearable. They had begged her mother to let them build her a bungalow on the Macher, but she had refused all help but a little money for repairs. Now it was a dark November night, and the gales were howling over the damp Macher. Min stared around the room, sniffing that familiar fug of smoke belching back out of the hearth, wondering how she had ever lived in such a hovel. She tried to stifle such shameful thoughts as her mother lay close to death. The two of them had never been close, not even when she was young, for Mother had seemed so grim and downtrodden, having to kowtow to Uncle Niall's commands as if she was his servant, grateful for a roof over her head, not his sister. In later years, she had been in awe of Harry and Min's way of life, and an uncomfortable visitor at Putlandry, but no one could say that her daughter hadn't been dutiful. She did feel guilty that she had not brought her down to Putlandry to live in a modern cottage, to spend her last years in comfort, but Ailey was stuck in her peasant ways, and spoke such halting Highland English that it would have been painful for both of them. It would never have worked. In her heart, she excused this lack of insistence because she sensed that Mother would have hated to be far from the sea and the people she knew, trapped in an alien land. Sometimes it felt as if she had neglected her mother. All those years of poverty, of coolness and silence for being a bastard child, of no consequence had driven a wedge between them. Now they lived in separate worlds. Now she wanted to cushion her from the pain and the draughts, but it was too late. Come close, Min Mahoy. Don't be weeping for me, but for yoursel. There's something that I'll be shedding from my soul afore I face my Maker, Mother whispered. Wheesht, Mother. The old language came haltingly as Min drew the wooden chair closer to the bed. It's time I spoke the truth to you. Hard have I been on you to protect you from the curses of leaving this island shore. Now I'm after thinking that my task is done if I tell my story once only to you. What troubles you? What secrets are these? She could feel the heat of her cheeks as she thought of her own guilty secrets. What was there more to say on the matter? Closer in, child, so the spirits hovering don't catch my tail. About your father, Ailey gasped. Yes, she replied, hoping to find the truth would be aired at last. It shames me to go to my grave without unburdening the sorry tale of him. Don't get hopes up. The truth is no very edifying. So, who is the mystery man I've lived with all these years? I'd love to know his name. Min bent to hear the whispering lips. It is shaming me that I dinna ken his name. I was in service in Glasgow, a very respectable place in Kelvinside, in the West End. I was sent as a maid at just 15. They were a musical family with this big piano. I had to polish it every day. They said it was one of the last to come down the water afore the Great War, a Winkleman. I can see the letters etched in gold. I had to sit underneath to polish its legs, big, round, curvy legs, fat as a beast. I knew every grain of wood on that wooden beast. I was the tweenie. You know how that is, up and down stairs, a wee dog's body trying to keep out of sight of the mistress, like some sea misty ghost on the stairs. The effort of talking was exhausting her, but she drew a deep breath. One night, there was a concert at the St Andrew's Hall, and the piano man came to tune the beast. Then the man came to practice on our piano, to loosen his fingers on the keys, leaving his finger marks on all my polishing. He made fine music. I'll give him that. I was polishing the legs when he came in and hid under the beast, out of the way, with the bangs and crashes in my ears, deafening me like the crack o' doom. Min had never heard this tale before, and could picture how it was at the Cranach. The house fell silent when they all went to hear him play, and we were made to wait up and see to the fires, and the supper on the return. I sat at yon piano and tried to make it sing for me, but it wouldn't play. Then they came back with the piano man, and there was a fuss, more singing and playing and fizzy wine, and they all said he was the maestro. He patted the beast and said it was a fine instrument and well cared for. Ailey was swallowing, and Min gave her a drip of water from the little funnel cup. I waited until they all went to bed to see to the fire in the music room. He was still pacing up and down, full of wine and praising. I saw he was an older man with a moustache, very tall. I bent down to see to the coal bucket, but he took me by surprise. Min's heart was thumping as she saw the scene in her head, in the half-light of flickering firelight and gas lamps. The rump of the young maid in her starched, rustling skirt, round and inviting, the man watching her bend. He took me on the floor under the piano. I was trapped like a ship in a glass bottle. He forced me open, for his own relief, like a bull at a coup, as if I was some beast on the field. I was so afeard. I shut my eyes to hide from this shaman under the roof of the damned piano. Just a wee maid I was, intact, innocent to the ways of men, but no more after that night. You heard of such things, but the shame of it, I'll say no more. Oh, mother, who was it who did this to you? I've no mind of his name. Only his music and his piano, but I ken he was from foreign parts. He spoke a gay, queer English. His shadow was tall. I found golden hairs in my shirt. You must have his looks, for they're no mine. I was so shamed when I knew my condition that I wrote away home and begged for my fare. I told nobody. He was the guest in the house, a stranger, but no gentleman, so it makes no difference. I never clapped eyes on the beast again until you were born, and I saw those blue eyes staring up at me. Give me a sip of water. Min poured from the stone jug into the invalid's cup, with its tiny spout to aid the supping of liquids down her mother's parched throat. All this time I've let them think I fell to some fisherman as his whore. Then I hear you singing and carrying on, making music and growing like a beanpole. I wished you dead many a time, but new life flies with its own wings, they say. And you've made your way despite your birthing to be a lady, one who can hold her head up in any company. I see you turn your nose up now at the bed on which you were born in such fear. Ailey lifted her head from the pillow as her daughter wept at this sad tale. All this time you've kept this festering in your heart. It wasn't your fault. You should have told me before, she cried. Would it make any difference, Mogoy? What's for you will no go past you, as well you know. Ailey sobbed in gasps, and Min grabbed her bony hand and cried for all the pain her mother had held in her heart. It tore at my heart to see you at a piano singing and carrying on, knowing where you got all that music. What's done is done and can't be altered. I've said my piece and that's the end of it. I can go now and it's time. I've had enough of this pain. It's been a hard life, but the Lord is merciful. The doctor has eased my pain away. Fetch the salt and the earth. Min wept softly as she searched for a saucer and sprinkled some salt and drew grit from the soil outside the door, mixing them together in the saucer to place on her mother's chest to settle her dying spirit the old way. Why wait until now to tell me all this? Her heart cried out with shame and pity. If only we had been closer and not such strangers. Poor, lonely mother. These last words on earth explained her strictness, her shame and her reluctance to let her leave Fetri. Has the tide turned yet? I shall go out with the tide into the sea without a shore. Ailey lay quietly, with her face to the wall, turning from life, breathing in rasps now. Min dozed by her side, jolting herself awake to see if there was any change, holding her hand. In the early light, she saw that there was no more breathing and opened the door to release Ailey's spirit into the wind. The shoreline was littered with spoils from the sea and the tide was far out, carrying her mother's sad soul to Tirnanog. There would be much to see to, visits to make and a funeral arranged. She would wire Harry not to come to the funeral. She would see to it all herself. In death as in birth, there had only ever been the two of them. So now Ailey would have the best of funerals. It was the only way Min could soothe her guilty heart. Underneath her fine clothes, cashmere and silks, the mink coat and the diamond watch flashing on her wrist, the handmade brogues, nothing was changed. Here on Fetri, she felt still that bastard child, conceived in lust and born in fear. Why had they never understood each other until it was too late? If only she could have admitted how right her mother was to fear her own fate. How ungrateful she had been. If only they had loved each other, but there was no touch of love between them. Even at the end, they had kept their distance. In the days that followed, she was busy making arrangements, ordering provisions and a hearse, until Uncle Niall and his shrimp-like wife, Mima, came on the first boat from Glasgow. As male head of the household, he wanted to make all the decisions. She retreated into the local hotel, sick of watching Mima claw her way through Mother's trunk like a vulture, sifting out all Min's expensive gifts. Silk scarves and lamb's wool cardigans, pretty stone brooches, still unwrapped and unused, packing them in her suitcase to take home for herself. Uncle Niall saw to the burial plot and the catering for the funeral tea. Harry sent a lavish bouquet from Ayr from Anna. Mother might have been born in poverty, but she was buried with no expense spared on Min's part. Her presence on the island did not go unnoticed, and many, more out of curiosity than duty, called to pay their respects. Uncle Niall was just as wizened and dour as she remembered as a child, and his wife tried to pretend all the tasteful catering arrangements for the funeral tea were their own idea. It was easy to slip back into the role of useless girl, but a Lennox woman was not to be ignored. The marble headstone would be finely engraved and erected exactly to her specification. The bed was made up for Uncle Niall, but thankfully they preferred to stay at the local tavern to see his old seafaring shipmates. There was a crumb of comfort in sitting alone with the body until the day the men came for their dram and took the coffin down to Colfetrish kirkyard to be placed next to Grandfather McPhee and his lineup of ancient relatives. Here they were warmed with another dram and then on to the Tullach for Niall's wake. The women in black and grey sat around the croft, sipping tea and cracking to each other at a speed Min was finding hard to follow. Her Gaelic was rusty, but fluent enough to overhear that Yuan Du was back on the island with his wife. Walking along the beach, she bent westward into the wind, humbled by its force, pausing to catch her breath, heart thudding at the news. Fetri was an island of winds that whistled, sang, roared as they pleased. Isle of the Singing Winds, some bard had proclaimed. Now it was screaming into her ears, making them ache. There is danger here. How she needed to escape. The coastal path was tarmacked, where once her bare feet had skipped along the rutted, sandy track, chasing the hens. The narrow lanes still stretched from Colfetrish like arteries pumping the daily gossip from the harbour in carts and traps to the four corners of the island. Nothing was changed. The shimmering outlines of the purple isles across the white sand bay, the roaring tide and waves. Yet, everything was changed. Yuan was here on the island, and she was afraid. Visiting old haunts and looking out at the grey water with aching eyes, she had forgotten how depressing the winter months on Fetri could be. Now she longed for the safe warmth of Putlandri and Anna, the warmth of the kitchen stove, and the chatter of children bickering over toys. She yearned for the satiny quilt of her eiderdown, the eagerness of Harry's embrace. Putlandri was her rightful home, where all things were possible because Harry was generous and careful for them. Ewan McKinnon seemed like some far distant ghost from a half-forgotten past. He had proved unreliable and cold. He was not the upstanding island son everyone thought him on Fetri, where his praises echoed in every conversation. He was cruel and fickle and unreliable, and she never wanted to see him again. Chapter 4. Colfetrish. There was a phone message left for Min at the Fetri Hotel, and a card with a small bunch of late roses from Mrs. Ewan McKinnon, which read, "We were sorry to hear of your sad loss." She picked them up with trembling fingers. So they were both here. Word would have gone round the townships. As if reading her very thoughts, the young manager called out her name. "Mrs. Lennox, a call for you." Min ran to his office, hoping it was Harry and Anna ringing to give her support after such a long day. "Min, camera how?" said a familiar voice. How was she? After all these years, how could Ewan just pick up the phone out of the blue? There was no escaping this encounter, and Min's voice trembled. "Yuan Du? What a surprise!" There was no warmth in her voice or the English of response. "Min, it is you. I knew you'd come home. I was so sorry to hear about Ailey." He was continuing as if he hadn't heard her coolness. "Thank your wife for the flowers. It was thoughtful of her," she said. "Joanna has a kind heart." There was an awkward pause. "How long are you staying?" "I leave tomorrow on the boat. I can't face flying back at the moment," she replied, trying to sound cold and indifferent. "Mistress McPhee must have been glad you came to her at the end," he said. "I know my duty." She bristled at his insinuation. "What brings you back to Fetri after all these years?" "The call of the sea, the turn of the tide, a chance to take stock and think about my work before we're off travelling again. I've always worked better in the open and on the move." "Is Joanna happy to be back?" Min was keeping her voice smooth. "She's resting. We've a child on the way. You know how it is in the early days," he offered. Min patted her own stomach and smiled briefly. "I do indeed. I can hardly keep anything down myself at the moment," she replied. "Are you still in the Borders?" he continued. "Yes, we decided to stay on there. It suits the family," she added. "How many of there are you now?" A little girl and one on the way. We're hoping for a boy this time. She was shaking. Why was he asking these questions? Mr. Lennox must be a proud man. It's a fine spread you have there, Ewan answered. How do you know? You've never been to Pitlandry? Min gasped. What was Ewan hinting at? I have so. I came to see you. There was a deafening silence. Min felt her stomach churning and her legs shaking. When was that? She said, suddenly feeling queasy. Last year, in the spring after that dreadful winter. I was in Europe and missed most of it, but when I found your letter, I sent you a telegram and I came on the next train, he said. I received no telegram from you, not one word. You came up to Pitlandry and I was never told. Who did you see there? Even her voice was trembling now. The chauffeur. He told me all about your pilot and your little girl. Discreetly, of course, he answered, and Min felt the shock waves down her body. She wrapped her fur coat around her to shield herself from this blow. His words were making no sense. What chauffeur? There was no chauffeur then. In fact, I did most of the driving myself, she snapped. He was mending a rather splendid Lagonda, if I recall correctly, a ginger-haired chap. He told me all about your engagement to the Air Force chappie. You're talking double Dutch. Min was shouting down the phone. I was never engaged to a pilot. Who told you this? Harry, the chauffeur. It was he who told me all about the Battle of Britain hero, Roddy Lennox. She could hear the sneer in his voice. There was another silence. I think you've made a mistake, Ewan. Roderick Lennox died in the Great War. Harry is his younger brother. I married Harry eventually when you never came. And did Harry tell you I had a child by his brother too? Oh, God, the bounder. I knew he could bluff, but this, it takes my breath away. Min's voice was trembling as she tried to make herself understood. And you believed him? I wrote to you and waited, but you didn't come. I thought you didn't care. Oh, Ewan, he's cheated us. He must have taken the telegram and waited for you. Then he told a pack of lies, and when I was low, he pounced. He asked me to marry him. The phone line began to crackle. She was trying to grasp what Ewan was saying. Sorry, Min, my timing was always a bit off. I was frightened of getting in the way again like I did with Ken. After Ken's death, do you blame me? I just thought it better to disappear. He took me to the station and saw me off. I fell for his story hook, line and sinker. I thought he was a good chap, going out his way to do me a favour. The only favour Harry ever does is for himself. Oh, Ewan, she pleaded. I can't believe it. You were in Pitlandry and I never knew it, and here's me thinking you didn't care. I never stopped hoping, but I thought you no longer remembered all our promises, she whispered, thinking fast. All the years rolled away, and she could see them together once more alone on the shore. I've always loved you, Ewan. Harry could never make me feel what I felt for you. These years have made no difference, have they? There was no stopping her now. Ewan's voice was shaking as if he had been taken by surprise. But we're both married now, Min. It alters things. Joanna's a good wife to me and there's a baby on the way. I know, and I bet she's not a bit like me, is she? Min answered, shocked at her own desperation. After what we've both heard, we can't just leave it like this, can we? Harry lied and cheated. I owe him nothing. How could he do this to us? Because he loved you and bagged you for himself. He was ruthless, but he's got what he wanted now, said Ewan. And his answer sounded final. She was too angry to let him go. All these years he's let me think ill of you, making it easy for me to give in to him. If I'd known you were still waiting, I'd never have married him. You must believe that, she cried down the phone. But you did marry him, Min, and I thought I was doing what was best for you. He suggested that the Lennoxes could give you all the things I couldn't, so I let you go. It seemed the fairest thing to do after Ken. His shadow has loomed large over our lives. I never want to destroy anyone again. Shush, walls have ears here. If only you'd trusted me. I wrote because I had so much to tell you about us, so many things to explain, she pleaded, pacing up and down and around the phone cord, banging her hand on her head. Where does the baby fit into all this? Or was that another figment of his vivid imagination? Said Ewan. The moment had arrived at last to tell him the truth about Anna. I was coming to her. Oh, Ewan, she's such a beauty. I want to tell you about her, but I want to tell you face to face. Meet me at the beach tomorrow morning. No one will see us. I have to tell you about Anna, she whispered. I'm not sure that's wise, Min. I don't want trouble. It's been over for us a long time now. It can't be over for us. We've something binding us together forever. You have to understand about Anna. I want to explain it all. Surely you still feel something for me deep down. Please, for Auld Lang Syne, she pleaded. You're distraught. It's your mother's death affecting you. Once we walk down the road, there's no saying where it will end. In tears and guilt like the last time. Or have you forgotten? His voice was trembling too. You sound so hard and cruel. It wasn't my fault Harry messed up our reunion. My head is bursting with regrets. You've no idea what the past few days have dredged up for me. And now this, she pleaded. Just come to our try tomorrow morning, please. But if you truly wanted me, Min, you'd have kept on waiting and turned the Lennox fellow down. If you truly loved me, you'd have not left one pebble on the beach unturned until you'd traced me. I think that Harry's offer was always too good to turn down. Look at you. It is said you are a lady now with fine furs, a queen on the island. It's been noticed, girl, how you never brought your daughter to see your mother, but kept away for fear of getting her shoes muddy. There are many eyes and ears on Fetchy who will be telling the truth and shaming the devil. You took Harry's offer as you took poor Ken Broderick's offer. I realised a long time ago that you and I were not meant to be. He paused. Perhaps it's our punishment for what we did to Ken. There's no going back to the way we were. We've both changed. Joanna is a good friend and I won't betray her loyalty, however many promises you and I made in the past, Min. But it's not fair. I waited when you went missing. I waited for you after the war, she argued. Not for long enough. You've always liked your comforts, and the temptation of an easy life was just too much. So go back and enjoy all your comforts. It'll make this disappointment more bearable, he sneered. How could Ewan be saying these words? Go to hell, Ewan do, you black heart. Why did you ring me then? Was it just to taunt me with all of this? It's not fair. Min was sulking, her lips pouting into a tight ball. She could hear the laughter in his voice. If you could see how you're sounding, it would not be a pretty sight, Minnie McPhee. You made your choices and we've all got to live with them, as best we can. Go back to Harry the chauffeur and wring his neck or squeeze him dry. It's far too late for us now. But I have to tell you about Anna. Min was screaming down the phone. Come to the beach tomorrow, she ordered, but the phone had gone dead. How could that man say such things? Insult her with such venom when her mother was not cold in her grave? Where there was hate, there was also love, she mused. Perhaps he was as shocked and stunned by her presence on the island as she was by his. He wanted her to flee from its shores, but she was going to go to the beach for Auld Lang Syne, and he would come. She tossed in her narrow bed, listening to the sound of waves pounding on the shingle. He must come. What they had to say to each other must be said face to face. Ewan was no coward. He would come and she would feel his arms around her once more and the scent of his breath. This was their special island, and he had always belonged to her here. She ate no breakfast and walked along the coastal path in the wind and the rain. Her shoes were soaking in the boggy macher, but Min drew strength from fresh air. It was a longer walk than she recalled, and she was tiring, but she could have made her way blindfold. Such was her confidence that he would be waiting there once more. Beach of the Singing Winds was calling them both, carrying their old loving promises across the air into the ocean. Today Ewan would hear the truth at last, and they could begin afresh, putting all the past misunderstandings and mistakes behind them. She could hardly wait to see his handsome face, and he would see how sleek and smart she was, how well dressed in a cashmere suit and furs, how grown up she now was. She waited on the sand by the edge of the sea, watching the roaring waves and listening to the howl of the wind through the rocks. She waited by the iron gate onto the Macha and found the boulders where they had first made love. She waited and waited until she knew it was time to walk back for her luggage, but still Ewan did not come. Later, as she hung over the rail of the steamer, chugging out of Colfetrish harbour to plough its way back to Oban in the choppy winter sea, she wept. The seagulls screeched overhead as the islanders waved off the boat in time-honoured fashion. There was no one to see her humiliating departure. There was no one left who cared if she ever returned. In her belly were the first quickenings of life, like the flutter of butterfly wings. New life flies with its own wings, Mother had once said ruefully, but she would be carrying this child now with little joy. How could she ever forgive Ewan's cowardice? How could he walk away from meeting her? Perhaps he now thought her foolish and extravagant, vapid and shallow. Perhaps he no longer desired her, thinking her fickle and mercenary in marrying for money. Perhaps it was true. There was a fatal weakness in some of her decisions, but it was his staying away that shamed her most. Was he afraid to see her? How could she have thrown herself at him so eagerly after all these years? The bond between them was shattered, and for Ewan there was no going back for Joe's sake. He was an honourable man, and she was a faithless woman. Now she was leaving Fetri with a cold steel plate of armour round her broken heart. Never would she return to this shameful island and all the broken promises. Her throat was dry, and her voice had cracked when she had tried to sing a funeral elegy for her mother. No love song would ever pass these lips again, she thought. Her ears would be deaf to the siren sounds of music. She was after all a bastard child, not of Fetri, but of some mongrel mixture born of such a cruel mating. That must be another secret. Min turned away from the retreating grey shore to face the open sea ahead. From now on she was going to live life to the full as Harry's lady. With a vengeance would she see to it that he gave her everything she desired in payment for his treachery. Never would she tell him of this discovery, but it would lie between them in the sheets like a brick wall. Ewan paced around the studio half the night. You must be off your head to make contact with her after all these years, he thought. Why was he considering meeting his old love on the Trigunanshine? Only a fool would meet that sea Cailleach again. He was ashamed of his outburst over the telephone, words spoken in anger to a woman still in the throes of grief. Hearing the shock of her revelation about Harry Lennox's treachery had slowly dammed the torrent of his own spite. They had both been duped by this man's cunning deception. Now he must be strong for both of them and walk away from temptation, turn his back on her pleadings, to the awful truth of their betrayal without a backward glance, for Joanna and their baby's sake. He had slammed down the phone on Min in fear, not hearing out her story about her bairn. In truth, he had fled from her voice, from the power of her presence on the island and her eagerness to meet him once more. The impact of that smile would never change. He would be as helpless as on the very first day they had met. She was a dangerous woman, he argued to himself, a magnetic force, pulling him like the tide into treacherous waters. There was his wife to consider. He loved Joanna's gentle ways. And there was a new life to prepare for. Joanna was the one who had comforted his disappointments, built up his confidence, stuck by him in college, supporting them financially in this time. Surely he was man enough to face that siren and stand firm by his principles and walk away from her wiles. Surely old friends could be sensible and rational and considered in all their actions when they met. What was the harm in bidding her farewell one more time? He woke early to do the morning chores, seeing to the fire and the stove as usual, combing the beach for firewood along the shoreline. He often took his sketchbook to the far end of the island to capture a scene, to finish off some detail. Joanna was feeling sick and rose slowly in the morning to ease her discomfort. She would not worry if he left her for a few hours. It was after all her suggestion that they contact Min before the funeral. He had stayed away from Ailey's funeral and the burial out of respect. Surely there was no harm in visiting Min now to pay his respects. Deliberately he rose out on his bike in the opposite direction from their appointed meeting place. He took his sketchpad out to the north shore, to the circle of standing stones, to catch the morning light on the gnarled stones, to sketch in the final details for a study of rocks and fortresses he was making. He listened to the gulls screeching and sipped from his hip flask, gathering courage before he would face his old lover for the last time. Time always flowed freely when he was at work, and it was only when he saw the light had shifted that he paused to glance at his watch. It said 10 o'clock, but he could tell by the sun that it was nearer midday. He shook his wrist, but the minute hand was still. The damned thing had stopped, and he hadn't noticed. He had only the sun to go by, and he was late. Far too late. He should have been relieved that fate had intervened once more to prevent their meeting. But Ewan was cycling like the Furies towards her, along the flat tracks that curled and turned through farmyards to find a shortcut, carrying the cycle over the bogs and marshland, heading ever westwards towards the beach of the Singing Winds. Perhaps she would still be waiting. Perhaps it was not as late in the day as he feared. On he cycled into the wind that tore at his flapping wind cheater and baggy corduroys, pushing him backwards, not forwards. Now it was imperative that he made the rendezvous with Min, imperative that they make one final farewell and finish the business between them begun so long ago. Puffing and winding, he sped down the hidden valley, but he knew in his heart she was long gone. He heard the distant hoots of the steamer leaving Colfetrish Harbour, and sat down with his head between his hands. Alone he faced the grey-green crashing of waves pounding the shore, flinging their spume in a welcome spray. The sea did not care. The sea was a fickle mistress of fortune, swayed by moon, wind and tide. The sea had taken their dead and not thrown back the evidence, and the sea had stolen his little sister without mercy and crushed her on its rocky heart. In his fevered brain, Min and the sea were one and the same to him. For days after her departure, he hunted on the shore for a sighting of Min, while knowing in his head that she had left the island for good. He took his sketchbook down to the water, walking for hours, sifting through ideas for a large seascape upon which he could express all his anger and sorrow. A canvas on which to vent his frustration and fury in some meaningful madness. He must work through the night to erase Min McPhee's hold on his heart, making huge waves to drown out her face from his mind forever, With the help of whiskey and cigarettes, he saw before him a terrible sea hag with gorgon hair and grasping claws. Then the vision changed into a beautiful mermaid sunning her body on the rocks, luring him towards her with siren songs. The arching waves were in her hair, and the sea in the colour of her eyes. With this vision came the terrible sight of shipwrecks and the broken bodies of mariners flung on the white sand. Agnes drowning, her body bloated and her eyes picked clean, flashed before him. Life and death, lust and love, passion and betrayal were in his brushstrokes that night. As dawn rose, it was finished. Ewan looked upon the sight of his creative wrath and was satisfied. Part of him stood back to admire the effect. It was rougher and more alive than anything he had ever painted before. There was a new confidence to his style, with a careless but powerful use of colour. There was something new growing from all this hurt, and he liked the effect. He would experiment again with the same textured effect. This painting would never be for sale, but would lie hidden, its face to the wall of his studio, gathering dust, as a warning, a constant reminder of the futility of love. It would not be for public viewing. He could never inflict the grief of his lost passion on anyone, especially not Joanna. She would be hurt by these feverish outpourings if she knew how much loving Min was his muse. Min would always have a corner of his heart, but her face must be turned to the wall. The canvas was laid to rest, covered in brown paper on the shelf, where it must stay to remind only him of his own frailty, weakness, and his lost love. It was signed and dated. The title was scribbled on the back of the canvas. Try Gunenschein, Beach of the Singing Winds, 1948. This canvas would be the firstborn of his grieving, and Ewan would insist that after his death, it must be burnt and the ashes scattered with his own at sea. Perhaps now he would find some peace. Chapter 5. Pitlandry, 1950. You ought to be doing something with that voice of yours, Mistress Lennox, whispered the choirmaster, Archie Carswell, after the rehearsal in Pitlandry Parish Church. It's far too good for this wee choir. I know someone in Edinburgh who'd love to take you on. It's a solo voice, a Kathleen Ferrier voice, lying undiscovered in this backwater, he sighed. There was much talk about the discovery of this Lancashire woman whose prodigious talent was taking the operatic world by storm. Thank you. That's most kind of you, but no thank you, Archie. Coming to the choir each week suits me fine. What would I want with singing lessons? Min brushed off his compliments with a wary smile. With respect, I disagree, Archie argued. A voice like yours should be used, stretched and trained to give pleasure to others, not stuck in a pew and brought out only on Sundays. Now, when would I be getting time for trips to Edinburgh with 2 children, a house to run, and a husband who's too busy for his own good? Mr. Lennox is in London again? Archie asked with deference, and she nodded. I'd love you to do the introit solo for Lead Me Lord. I'm not sure. Since Hugh was born, I'm not sure. Min sighed, torn between her lethargy and wanting to please Archie to stop him pestering her again. If only she didn't feel so tired and indecisive. The truth was that since her return from Fetri after her mother's death, everything was an effort, and the thought of standing up in front of the congregation, having to learn a new piece of music, was something she could do without. I'll think about it and let you know, she said, hoping that he would now forget all about his request, and she could just nestle behind the stone pillar with the other sopranos unnoticed. There were so many alterations to oversee while Harry was away on yet another of his trips south. The new kitchen and the stable block to be converted into a huge garage for the Pitlandry fleet, an expanding range of expensive cars. Harry's motors were like his baby son, cosseted and preened over, his pride and joy. Only behind a wheel driving fast did he seem to relax. Min drove a large shooting brake, a belated present for her birthday. At the time, it felt more like an afterthought for Harry's collection than a real expression of love to her. Since Hugh's birth in the summer of 1949, their marriage seemed to be limping along. The birth of a son was the pinnacle of success for Harry, but Min felt so lethargic and depressed, unable to snap out of the doldrums, uninterested in the growing success of the Lennox Corporation. Her world was shrinking to the nursery and schoolroom and taxiing her daughter to an exhausting array of lessons, pony club meetings and birthday parties. Harry spent more time in London and Edinburgh developing his ventures, and she had no energy or desire to accompany him to all the dinners and business gatherings. Since her return from Fetri, they both were busy avoiding each other. The doctor had suggested she took herself off abroad into the sun to lift her spirits. But the thought of being stranded on some foreign beach seemed more effort than it was worth. Since that fateful return from Mother's funeral, it was as if the two of them inhabited separate worlds now. She and the children lived in the Borders, and Harry joined them at weekends for parties, balls, and hunting in the season. Outwardly, nothing had changed. Inwardly, she was in turmoil. They were seldom alone, for there was always some business visitor dragged up north to sample the splendours of Pitlandry hospitality and some good shooting. Harry would stay up late at these boozy functions, with the sort of businessman who bored Min rigid. Then he would stagger home legless at dawn, sleeping in his dressing room so as not to disturb her fitful sleep. Life went on at Pitlandry House at its own pace, in tune with the seasons. She never tired of its woodland beauty. She found she relaxed best helping Gil Chisholm in the vegetable garden, digging over the fine tilth, planting out and planning new borders. Alone in the enclosed world of their kitchen garden, there was no time to brood while Hugh sat in the bucket pram, as had his sister before him, throwing his toys out onto the path for her to retrieve. He was the image of his father, with foxy hair and bright eyes, and she adored his chubby arms around her neck. Anna was growing fast and about to start in the village school. She wore dark pigtails and an intense look in her eyes, signalling determination to master every move with her pony, Dusky. Sometimes when Anna frowned, there was a V-shaped furrow over the bridge of her nose, and for a second, Min would think she recognised something, but then stop herself. It was no good moping about what had happened in the past. Better to let things be now. Singing in the church choir was another simple pleasure, and now Archie was going to spoil it by suggesting she did a solo or took her musical interest seriously. The ache in her heart for what might have been with Yoon had dulled over the past year. There was no point in telling Harry his deceit was unmasked. Why rake up old bones? Better to leave them buried with her dreams. Yet it had brought up all her doubts about his honesty and destroyed her trust in him. What else did she not know about? Now there was the joy of children, of course, but what about when they were sent away to school? Sometimes the emptiness inside her felt like a pain. To the outside world, Mary Lennox had everything. She appeared like an elegant white swan gliding calmly through her commitments to the village. Women's rural, church, charity work without so much as a ripple on the surface. But Min knew otherwise. Underneath all this graciousness and geniality was a darker, unknown part of herself paddling like fury to keep afloat, with all those shadowy secrets that hid in the recesses of her mind. Strange how the world she had coveted in the Crannog all those years ago no longer satisfied. Why, when she had everything around her, was she not content? Why was it when she looked at Harry, with his moustache already peppered with grey, his agate eyes and slight paunch, did she feel a growing sense of panic? The minister had preached last week something from St. Augustine about taking what you want in life but being prepared to pay the asking price for it. She had craved security and comforts all her life, but there was little joy now in their acquisition. Even her collection of china no longer interested her. No one had warned her that a cabinet of cold porcelain figurines was no substitute for real love. Ewan's gift of the shepherd and shepherdess still stared from the shelf, unmoved by her restlessness. He no longer cared, so why should she? Perhaps what she needed was another interest. Something to take her mind from everything, and listening to music was a great comfort to the soul. Should she take up Archie's suggestion? A trip on the train to Edinburgh, shopping on Princess Street, might shake her out of this lethargy. She might have tea with a friend. What friend? Who are you kidding, she thought. Most of the wives she met with Harry were acquaintances, strictly for business, with no common points of interest. If one was as rich as one's friends, then she was a pauper, she sighed. To have a friend, you have to be a friend, and she was too wrapped up in the children and the house to take time to make any. She felt alone now in this marriage with just hired help and the children for company. Edie and Gil Chisholm were the nearest she had to loyal friends, but they knew nothing of her private turmoil. Perhaps a proper assessment of her vocal cords by a professional teacher would put paid to all this nonsense once and for all. Archie would be satisfied when he heard that his prodigy was, after all, just a middle-of-the-road mezzo-soprano. The morning of her visit to Moira Sanderson in Elgin Square, Min dressed with care, not knowing how to present herself before the teacher. Country housewife in tweeds, smart girl about town in a shapely two-piece with a peplum jacket and straight skirt, or casual in a swagger coat, slacks and scarf. None of these seemed right, somehow. Min the singer was plain Min McPhee of Fetry, and she would have worn a kilt and a Fair Isle jumper, her hair brushed back into a chignon and berry. The songs she would sing would be the old ballads, and she knew them by heart. She had taken herself far from the island, but no one could take the Hebridean childhood out of her soul, haunted as it was by such yearnings for escape. In her heart, she was still that scraggy child singing by the shore in a dirty dress and bare feet. She would dress simply in a tartan and cashmere with a string of fine pearls, just to give her courage. She caught the early train, with instructions left for the children to be good for Edie and a belated call from Harry, wishing her luck for the audition. She was hours too early for her appointment, and hung about the shops in Princess Street. The rationing seemed worse than ever, and there was nothing to tempt her in the shop windows but paper displays. Since the war, everything looked shabby and tired. The buildings needed paint, and shoppers all grey and duns with no colour anywhere. There was plenty of time to stroll through the gardens and take in the latest exhibition at the Scottish Royal Academy. Here she could feast her eyes on some colour. It felt so peaceful to walk through the Grecian splendour and the cool stillness of the viewing rooms after the bustle of the busy streets, her feet echoing on the marble floors. There was a mixed exhibition of young Scottish painters and sculptors. She glanced at the catalogue, recognising Willie Wilson's work, Joan Ardley's paintings of the East Coast, and Ian Fleming's stone harbours and Harold cottages. The theme of the exhibition was seascapes and sky. Then she saw a canvas, and her heart stopped. It was a violent seascape of crashing waves and a shoreline on which a coiled lone figure was lying on the sand with dark hair streaming out like seaweed, naked, vulnerable against the power that had thrown the body back to the beach. She sat down breathless to search out the artist in the catalogue and saw the title, Agnes. The signature was so familiar that she found she was shaking at the imprints of a memory she could never quite recall. There were 2 other canvases by Ewan McKinnon, both of Fetri, one of an upturned boat used as a shed by the beach, every detail lovingly coloured. Ewan Du, Kimera, how are you doing? Can I never be free of you? Her heart cried as she sat transfixed by the oils, feeling the island tugging at her heart again. How can she be living so far from the sea? His pain and anger were in that canvas. Here were the rich blues and greens and greys, the white sands and all the colours she missed. She could feel the island's breath on the salt air, taste the smoky tangle of shingle and rocks as she sat lost in time and memories, until jolted back by her watch. It was time to run now to find the house and the stranger who would listen to her singing. Her throat was dry with emotion. How could she sing after such a shock? It was impolite not to turn up, but if only she could catch the first train home and forget those haunting images. Moira Sanderson was tall and elegant in a jersey wool dress that emphasised her willowy shape, not at all the teacher that Min was expecting. By the time she found Elgin Square, she was breathless and pink. "I'm sorry I'm late. I went to the exhibition and sort of lost track of time. I do apologise," said Min, aware that her hair was sprouting out of its chignon and her cheeks were aflame. "Sit down and tell me a little about yourself, Mrs. Lennox." "Archie tells me you have a voice worth hearing," the teacher said, ushering her into a large drawing room with a grand piano in the corner. "I can't sing now. I've had a shock," she replied, feeling the tears rising in her eyes. "Forgive me, I had a baby last year and I've not been myself. I greet at the slightest thing and I hate to be late. This is a terrible mistake. I'm sorry to waste your time," she said, rising to leave. "Please excuse me." "I'll be the judge of that. Sit down and take some deep breaths. There's plenty of time to sing, but tell me more about you. I see you're wearing tartan." "Which one?" said Moira, sitting down, unperturbed by Min's anxiety. "It's McPhee, my mother's family. I'm from Fetri. I never knew my father," she said, aware of the big piano and her mother's last words, feeling it was better to leave her history at that. "I sang a little as a child. I like music, any sort of music, but I've no training." "You sang in the Maud?" Moira asked. "No, I'm ashamed to say." How could she explain that the likes of her never were entered into a competition? "Then sing me something you'd have sung then, in the Gaelic," the teacher asked. "I can't remember. I brought some ballads," she offered, half-heartedly, pulling out a few scores from her shopping bag. "Sing me something you would have sung as a child. Anything will do. A lullaby, a walking song. Come on, don't get upset. You've had a shock. Sing me something that tells me how you're feeling." The teacher was trying to coax the music out of her. It was not going to be easy. Min stood up and looked out across the beautiful square and the grand houses opposite. It was a city landscape of grey stones and porticos. She thought about Yoon's pictures hanging in the gallery. He was an important artist now. Then the memories of Fetri and the little girl who used to sing by the shore to the seal, the old colonel, all those years ago came flooding back. If only you'd known then what you know now, she sighed to herself. From somewhere deep inside came this groan of sorrow, of yearning for home, anguish for her lost love. And she sang the lament for the drowned brother. Kua Ian Garaf Rasser. She sang through her tears in a language she thought she had abandoned. And it soared across the room, up into the high ceiling, out of the open window, so people stopped and looked up to see who was singing. And then she stopped. I can't go on. I'm sorry, I have to go, she wept. I've heard enough to know we must work on that voice and share it, Mrs. Lennox. I can train people to breathe and enunciate, but I cannot teach you what you have just shown me. Your voice is rich and pure and unspoilt. Don't waste your gift. Let me bring out its depth and tone. It would be a privilege to help such a sound go out into the world, the teacher said, touching her arm. Who is the musician in the family to have passed this on to you? I don't know. Perhaps my father, she said. I'm sorry to have wasted your time. I can't sing. I won't train. I have a family. It's all too late now, said Min, desperate to leave the room. It hurts me to sing. I have nothing to give. Oh, but you have. And it's never too late to sing. But training is hard and needs practice. Come back to me when you have the time, said the teacher, reluctant to let her go. It's not that. I haven't the heart for it. There's no songs I want to sing. It's like baring my soul, and I couldn't do that. Archie Carswell meant well, but it was a mistake. I do apologise, Min cried as she rushed down the steps and onto the pavement, blinded by tears. Let it be for now, Mrs. Lennox. The time will come when the songs will return to you. Your voice will have its day, and I shall look forward to seeing you then. Moira Sanderson waved from the door. Min sat in the train going home. How could she have been so stupid? If she had stayed at home, she wouldn't have known about Yoon's success and those terrible reminders. It was safer to go home and get on with her own life with her children and try to make up to Harry for not loving him. One evening in September, when the leaves were thick on the lawn and the rains had turned them into slippery, squelchy mulch, she dined alone, listening to the wireless. Anna and Hugh were asleep upstairs, and Edie had retired to the new cottage. Harry was out at some golf club dinner, and Hugh was wailing from the sound of their little battery alarm. He was not going to settle until she took him into her bed. She often slept better when his little body was curled up beside her. Harry would return when the spirit moved him. She did not hear him come back. They all slept in late, and Harry came thundering through into the bathroom with a hangover, demanding the keys to her shooting brake, muttering something about, "Taking your car this morning, darling. Moustache." Next moment, he had gone, leaving her to rouse the children for her own dash to Anna's school along the narrow, twisty lanes that edged the Tweed. Min refused to drive the Scarlet Jaguar, Harry's latest toy. It was fast and sleek, but she found its speed deceptive and unnerving. She didn't trust her turning on such slippery lanes. Min dropped off Anna by the school gate, stopping off on the way back at the post office for some stamps, where she found herself standing in the morning queue behind whisperings and tuttings of village wives on their way home from the school gate. "Good morning, Mrs. Lennox. Fine the day." They turned to acknowledge her, but carried on with their gossiping. She was used to being treated politely and kept at a distance, but the shop was full of the dramas of some road accident, and voices were loud with anxiety. "Shame about the 'prentice boy," Knocked right off his bike in the early hours. He's away to the big hospital. The bism didna even stop. Terrible, isn't it, Mistress Lennox? Yon lad works in the mill, home frae his shift on his bicycle. Found by the road, unconscious. Some beggar must have knocked him off and can't find what he'd done, said the post-mistress with indignation. Who's the boy? Min asked. Maggie Prentice's son. Just married and a bairn on the way. Works for Galbraith's woolen mill. His mother's in an awful state. Min knew Maggie Prentice from the Women's Rural. She always won the competitions for the best sponge cakes. All the way home, Min had a growing feeling of unease. Surely not. Harry wasn't involved. What human being would hit and then run? The roads were narrow, and a cyclist on a pedal bike, even with a dynamo lamp, would be difficult to spot, like a pinprick in the dark. She found herself making excuses for why somebody might not stop to see what they had hit in the darkness, unless... What if the driver was going too fast and couldn't stop? There would be skid marks and telltale signs, broken glass. What if the driver was drunk at the wheel? Min parked the estate van in its usual place, puzzled and not a little troubled as to why Harry should borrow her car this very morning. She peeped in the garage for the Jaguar, but it was not in its usual berth. Perhaps Harry had parked it round the back in the courtyard so that Gil could give it a clear, but it was nowhere to be seen. Perhaps it had merely broken down in the lane. But she knew she had not passed the car. Not to be thwarted in her search, Min made for the back of the house to where the cobbled road petered out into the track alongside the old hay barns. There were tyre marks leading up to the door, and her heart was thudding when the side door opened. She peered through the darkness with the help of a shaft of light from a glazed roof tile. There, under the grainy spotlight, was the Jaguar parked neatly with its face turned into the wall. Now her heart was thudding with apprehension and dread. It had been well hidden from view. Few people ever bothered to come to this barn. She needed more light on the situation, so lifting the heavy bars from the byre doors, she swung them open to let in the morning light and examined the front of the car carefully. One glance told her all she needed to know. The near side passenger light was cracked, and the paintwork was dented and scratched. This car had been in an accident recently, and it must have been Harry who had left the injured lad on the roadside to take his chance. He had just carried on regardless because he was drunk, but he had been mindful enough to hide the evidence from view. How many times recently had Harry returned the worse for wear? How many times had she warned him about his responsibility to set an example? How many times had her husband argued that he could hold his liquor, that he was a careful driver when he knew he'd been drinking? He knew when he had had enough, was his boast. What if Maggie Prentice's laddie died? What if his car was identified and Harry was sent to prison for manslaughter? What would happen to the business, the house, their children? Myriad questions spun around her head, and she felt that old, sickening fear returning. What should she do? Ring the police with her suspicions? Testify against her husband? The evidence was there for all to see. Min closed the door, trembling, feeling sick and ashamed. Harry had done many things, but to let a boy die. By the time he came home that evening, she was shaking with fury, waiting for his explanation. Why did he take my car this morning? The jug's playing up, Harry lied, confirming her worst fears. Where is it, then? She was not to be fobbed off. It's in the garage for repairs, he snapped, his hand already stretching out for the whiskey decanter. No, it's not, you liar. How come it's hidden in the far byre with a broken light and dents? Did you knock Maggie Prentice's boy down this morning? She screamed, pulling the glass out of his hand and smashing it on the floor. What on earth are you talking about? Look at the mess you've made, Harry bluffed. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Did you knock a man off his bike in the small hours and leave him for dead? She said with ice in her voice. Keep your voice down, the children will hear. There was a bump. I hit a rabbit, that's all, Harry whispered. Did you stop to find out? No, you were way too drunk and you swerved and sped on your merry way. It was Maggie Prentice's boy and he's in hospital. For all I know, he may be dead. Everyone knows how fast you drive, as if you own the road. You were drunk. You're always drunk these days. Min spat out her words. And whose fault's that? There's precious little to come home for these days. Not since Hugh was born, Harry snapped back. You turn your back on me every night. Go on, blame me, change the subject. Did you hit the cyclist? Min persisted. I don't know. I saw the damage when I got back. I didn't stop, but I was afraid. If I lose my licence, how can I do business? He whined. And she could see for the first time he was owning his crime. Away with you. You can afford to hire 10 chauffeurs if you need to. You have to report the accident to the police and cut down your drinking sprees. You have to stay home and be a responsible citizen. Take responsibility for your actions. And don't you dare blame me. Min was furious. Her eyes flashed icily at her husband. You disgust me, leaving a young man to die on the road. He's not dead, Harry croaked. I rang the ambulance from the call box as soon as I realised what had happened, if you must know. He's got a broken leg and concussion. He landed in the ditch and it broke his fall, thank God. Min paced the floor, speechless at his confession. She could see the shame and agitation on his red face. The veins on his nose were standing out. This was her husband, a liar, a cheat, a coward, a weak man who drank too much, and she hated him. So, what are we going to do about it? I don't know. You must own up to it at once. Claim you think you hit something last night. The longer you leave it, the worse it looks, she pleaded. What if I have to go to court? He argued. That's the least of your worries. You must apologise to the Prentice family, make it up to the couple. Say you were tired and half asleep after a long drive and you didn't realise. Please, Harry. It's the only way to square it with honour. Do you really think so? Don't be naive. It's already far too late to report the accident. It looks bad. Better to say nothing. I can make it up to Donny Prentice in my own way. Just leave it at that. I've learnt my lesson. Well, if you won't, I will, Min replied, her voice trembling as she made for the telephone. Harry grabbed her arm roughly. Let it be. You can't testify against me. Just hold on and think it all through. It has implications for you and the kids if I'm sent down. I promise that I'll never drink and drive again. Min turned and glared at him. Look, you've got to trust me. I know what's best for this family. I've learnt my lesson. Let me make it up to the Prentice family in my own way. There's no permanent harm done. It's just a little fall from a bike. His lights were faulty, I'm sure, Harry argued. How can I trust you, Harry Lennox? Everything you've ever done has been a lie. And worst of all, I'm stuck here because of your lies, she answered, suddenly feeling strong. What on earth do you mean by that? He looked like a little boy trying to fake his lying. Who was it that told Ewan McKinnon that I was about to marry Roddy Lennox and that my love child was his? Who was it who let him think he was talking to the chauffeur and who made him damn sure he was driven at top speed back from whence he came? Who made sure I never saw the telegram he sent? You sent him away and let me think he didn't care. How can I ever trust you after that? She said, turning away to stoke the fire. That was a long time ago. You were unhappy. He had hurt you and I wanted you. All's fair in love and war, darling. And I loved you the first time I set eyes on you. Don't blame a man for loving you. he said, trying to sit close to her, but she edged away. It's not love to deny someone their true happiness or to deny them their chance to choose. You cheated me as you cheated the government with your black market racketeering. Don't think I don't know how you kept this show on the road. I don't trust you, and I never will until you own up to what you've done. For once in your life, be a man and do something the honourable way and stop drinking so much. My cars and my wines are all the comfort I get in this cold house, he said. Show me some affection. He grasped her, but she struggled. Not now. Not until I'm sure you mean what you say, she said, standing up. I'm tired and I want to sleep alone. The rest is up to you. In the days that followed the accident, Min picked up the phone and dropped it many times. She watched for a blue police car coming up the drive, bringing a summons to their door. But as the days turned into weeks, nothing happened. Donnie Prentice came home, on crutches, to the arrival of a brand new bicycle, presented by the Pitlandry Men's Forum, whose president just happened to be Harry Lennox. Min recognised her husband's handiwork in the gesture. They maintained the usual outward appearances of unity for the children's sake, but Min had never felt so utterly alone or ashamed of her own cowardice. She could no longer live this lie, cushioning her misery with fine clothes, furniture and collectibles. This marriage was a sham. Even their wedding certificate was not worth the paper it was written on, since Ken Broderick was still officially declared missing. Did that make Hugh a bastard, like herself? She couldn't stand for him to bear that stigma. How would she ever learn to lead a single life or trust in her own decisions? Would Harry go on supporting them? How would she survive all the lonely weekends when there were no footsteps in the hall, bringing flowers and wine and gossip on a dark night? How would she fill the gap with only the children for company? A mother divorced, alone with children, was a social outcast. Her own mother had taught her that. Was she still a timid Highlander at heart? As the week went on and neither of them picked up the phone, Min could not sleep or eat or be civil to Harry. If the boy had been killed, what then? Would she have had the courage of conscience to have done something? She couldn't be sure. It was like leaving Ken Broderick all over again, and the fear of poverty was lurking at the back of her anxious mind. How could she live with herself? What example was it to their children? The more she rejected Harry's advances, the more she drove him from her bed, the worse it would get. He was right in that one thing. She was unfaithful, for she was still in love with Ewan. This strange affair was haunting her mind. It was the worst betrayal of all, which would wound Harry all his life. An affair of the mind that never ended because it was never properly fulfilled, she mused. She had tried to put Ewan out of her mind, living this insular life, distracted by theatre, music, fine art and family. There was no time to think about lost love if she was busy with the children or being entertained. Yet, in the early hours, in the twilight between waking and sleep, night and morning, when she was so vulnerable, he came to her, the dark man of her dreams. In the dream, she ran towards him with longing, calling his name into the wind. Catch a veil o'er it all. Where are you going? But the grey hair thickened, screening his face from sight. Then she woke with tears streaming down her face, a stab of pain in her gut, and the realisation that her marriage was a bed of sorrows, a bed of thorns, and it couldn't go on. Min rose early and began to pack. They would need warm clothes. Part 3. Is it not sweet to hear the breeze singing as lively it comes o'er the deep rolling sea. But sweeter and dearer by far 'tis when bringing the bark of my true love in safety to me. Chapter 1. Fétry. They bent westward into the wind round the edge of Colfetrish Bay, with its curved expanse of white sand. There was a thin line of blue on the horizon, and Min hoped that the worst of the storm that had trapped them indoors all day in the empty harbour hotel was over now. She held on tight to Hugh's hand as he waddled in his siren suit and new shoes, while Anna sped out of the doors like a young calf let out in the spring fields for the first time. It was a world of wonder for a child to run free on an empty beach, staring up at the neat thatched cottages and pointing to the roofs netted and roped with stone weights against the gales that had lashed the coast since their sudden arrival 2 days ago. The stone manse stood firm close to the village school, silent because it was mid-term and the children were helping with the potato harvest. Older, familiar faces passed them by, glancing in their direction, curious but polite. Their names tumbled out of her memory, and she nodded back. Soon it would be round the island that Minnie McPhee was back for a visit with her children. A gay, strange time to take a holiday, tongues would wag. Was it a holiday, an impulsive break away from the strain of the past weeks? Or was she fleeing from a stale marriage and Harry's weakness? She didn't know, and didn't care. It was enough just to sniff the wind and such familiar scents, a tangle of clover and thyme, salt and seaweed. There were terns diving overhead, lapwings chewitting in protest, and the kittiwakes soared as she carried Hugh down from the coastal path, across the wet macher towards the rocky outcrop close to a ruined harbour. From the pasture and track, they were turning from modern times to more ancient territory, where the past was harder to ignore. Here tramped the Duke's men to clear the land for sheep, and pushed her poor forebears to subsist on the shoreline. Here the sons of Fétry boarded men of war, pressed into service, never to return. Here the bodies of luckless mariners were carried shoulder high for burial, up the old gangway encrusted now with barnacles. It was as if her sturdy brogues footed themselves to this shore. "Come away from the water!" she cried out as Anna raced ahead. The girl turned and gave her such a look of defiance it shocked her. She darted across the rocks, muffled in her thick coat and woolly hat like a rubber ball. Hugh strained at the leash to follow her, struggling out of Min's grip, wriggling. "It's time to find Granny's house," Min shouted. "First to see it is king of the castle." Anna turned, curious, making her way back as they trod gingerly across damp boggy grass, avoiding the steaming cowpats and cattle and the dips where in summer the yellow flag iris bent to the force of Colfetrish Bay. Why had she never brought Anna when her mother was alive? Why did she wait until there was no one here to greet them to ask Uncle Niall for the loan of the cottage for a week or two? She had written to him asking if they could stay on Fétry, not waiting for his reply. The key would be where it always was, hung on the hook in the old byre. Here no one had need to lock their door. There was no public crimes, just the odd misdemeanour, a bit of drunkenness and a few secret lusts that were held in check by the Kirk elders. As they came ever closer, past the little clachan of cottages, she could hardly breathe for emotions flooding like the racing tide as the house of her childhood came into view, standing alone from the others. The vegetable patch overgrown, the thatch in need of repair, the thick walls standing sentinel. "This is where your mummy lived when she was a little girl," she whispered to Anna. "We're going to stay here for a little while," she said. Anna looked at it puzzled. "For a holiday?" she asked. "Perhaps," Min replied, pushing the creaking door into the byre, where once the cow snuffled in a warm mixture of dung and straw to find the dusty key for the lock. It was rusty and wouldn't turn. In frustration, she turned the knob and the door just opened. She stared into the little living room. There was still a scent of peat and smoke, like the scent of a rich malt whisky. She fingered the kist that kept the oats and flour dry, and the shelf above the fire, where the wooden-framed photograph of Uncle Niall in his uniform stood stern over their daily living, like the eye of the Lord. Min was lost for a second, reliving that last visit, the stink of a leaking paraffin lamp, the big black Bible in the corner open for evening prayers, and her mother's last confession. She saw the razor strap hanging on the hook behind the door and remembered the scalpings. Her eyes filled up with tears. "It smells in here and it's dark. Where's the light switch?" Anna sniffed, turning her nose up. "It's like a dollhouse. I don't want to stay in here." "Come and see the little bedrooms," Min replied, pointing to the door that opened into the bedroom with its brass bed and chest, and the other little box room that had been her own den while Uncle Niall was away at sea. "Look, here's the spinning wheel. Do you know, when I was small we gathered all the fallen fluff off the sheep and spun it into wool to knit our clothes. Wasn't that clever? And we even collected up the cow pats and dried them to put on the fire," she said. "Yuck! Cow poo! Mummy, that's horrible," Anna said. "I see I've grown a little snob, young lady," Min snapped. And who's to blame for that, she thought. Even she could see it was all too damp and fusty to live in straight away. It would need a good spring clean. The fire would need building up to heat the iron range for hot water. "Do we have to stay here?" said Anna, unimpressed. "It'll be like Little House on the Prairie. We'll light a fire and air the house and find the hot water bottles and buy some groceries from the store and have lots of fun," she said briskly. "When's Daddy coming? Why can't we stay at the hotel?" Anna was not for bribing. "He's busy at work, I told you before. This is our special adventure. Just the three of us to see if we'd like it. Don't you want to play in the sands and see where Mummy was a little girl?" It was going to be hard work coaxing the reluctant child who always took Daddy's side of the argument. Anna was spoilt and used to the easy ways of Putlandry. It would do them all good to do without comforts for a while, to be alone together and explore the island. Surely there would be a car to hire or a pony and trap. That would be an adventure. "I want to go outside," yelled Anna, dashing through the door again, her dark pigtails down her back, into the sunlight. Standing in this ghostly half-light, Min saw herself as a child, impatient, darting like a stoat out of a dike, and her mother's voice calling her back. "Catch a veil, Adol. Where are you off to now?" Anna was no different, and she smiled. "Don't go far," she yelled. "You can play on the grass, but not by the rocks. It's dangerous and slippery. Come and help me make a fire." There was no reply, as she watched Hugh sitting on the wooden floor contentedly, pulling at the old rug. She was going to need some help to make the cottage fit for them all to live in. As if in answer to prayer, an anxious voice shouted at the doorway in Gaelic. "Is that you, Mistress Lennox?" Outside was a familiar face from her past. A face older, leathery and wind-etched. Their neighbour, Peggy Sinclair. "If I'd known you were about the place, I'd have opened it up for you. The house has lain empty since your poor mother passed away. I've not seen Niall this past year. We heard you were back on the island with your bairns. Come away in with the wee boy for a warm-up and a blether. You're brave to weather the crossing at this time of year," said Peggy, ushering them to her own warm cottage. So her arrival was news already, and they were itching with curiosity. Peggy would ask gentle questions and form her own opinion as to why the wealthy Mistress Lennox should come back to Fetri at the time of the storms. It would be passed from the store to the Tullach, and the outlying farms that the McPhee girl was back to claim the cottage. "We flew in from Glasgow," she offered, knowing it was best to give a little true information. "This is Hugh Charles, Mistress Sinclair, and Morana has gone off to find her bearings. Thank you for your kind offer. A cup of tea would be a Christian act on this cold afternoon." "And Mr. Lennox? He'll be coming at the weekend?" asked Peggy. "No, he's far too busy," she replied, a bit too quickly. "And you'll be going back after the mid-term?" Peggy sipped, her ears flapping. "There's no rush. Anna's not in school full-time yet," Min said, feeling the heat of the peat fire on her cheeks. How cosy and warm these houses could be when the thick walls were heated through. "She's a big girl for her age. She'll be your first husband's girl?" Peggy asked. This inquisition had gone on long enough. "Thank you for the tea, but I must get on and open up the house. There's plenty of dry peat in the byre, I notice. I'll take the children beachcombing in the morning," she said, standing up to check Hugh, who was just about to pull the tablecloth onto the floor. "I'd better find Anna before she gets into mischief. She's away playing with Jessie Munn. See? Does she have the Gaelic?" Min shook her head, ashamed that she had not passed on her mother tongue. "Children learn quickly when left to themselves. They teach it in the school now. In my day, we were only allowed the English in class. But you'll not be stopping that long, will you?" said Peggy. "You nosy wee Cailleach," she thought as she whisked Hugh out of the door. It had brightened up, and so had her spirits. With Peggy's help, they could make the cottage clean, dry and lighter. "It must be our season for visitors this autumn," smiled Peggy Sinclair. "There's been a big gathering at the Crannog all summer. A bunch of artists from Glasgow taking over the big house as some school, comings and goings. The McCallum girl has been rushed off her feet, cooking for the lot of them, and now back in the village school teaching." "Joe McCallum? Joanna? I thought they were abroad now," said Min, stopped in her tracks by that name. "Aye, Mrs. McKinnon now, of course. Ewan Dew's the assistant warden at the Crannog. Made a name for himself in Edinburgh by all accounts, and here with a bunch of students. Most of them are on the way back now, for the course is over. It's nice to see the old place being used like the old days. You'll have to pay them a visit while you're here. You are all pals, as I recall." Peggy smiled, knowing full well that the whole island knew about Ewan and Min before the war. She stepped back blindly from the path, waving and calling Anna back from her playing. "He is here on the island," her heart cried, shocked by Peggy's news. She leant on the gate to recover herself. "He is here. Why are you so helpless when you hear his name on the wind?" she cried. Was there no escaping the torment of greeting a face that haunted her dreams? She had come here for peace of mind, for time to rethink the future. The letter left for Harry was terse and to the point, giving him no chance to persuade her to stay. "Dear Harry, tell Edie and Gil I've gone to Fetri for mid-term with the children. I can't stand the atmosphere. Need some time to clear my head. Don't come rushing after us. We'll be fine in the cottage. I'm trusting you'll take the time to sort out the Prentice affair while we're out of the way. Can't go on like this. Brodie." How could she find peace of mind now, trapped by the storms, by all the broken promises the two of them had made on this cursed island? There was so much still to say, and yet nothing to say. It was 6 years since they had last met face to face. Why was she feeling as if this impulsive flight with her children, this voyage of her heart, was ending here on this shore with the tide out, and the ferry boat cancelled for 100 years, with no means of escape? How could she face him again?